Durango City Council meeting of August the 21st. Summer's flying by. This is just a reminder to everyone in the audience, if you came to speak to City Council on any issues, you need to sign in at the front under public participation or any of the items on the agenda. Well, with that then, we will begin with a roll call, please.
Councilor Bettine?
Here.
Councilor Brickey?
Here.
Councilor White?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef?
Here.
Mayor Marbury?
And I'm here. So the first thing on the agenda is a presentation of a certificate of appreciation by the United States Forest Service.
I would just like to take a moment and introduce Matt Janowiak. He is with the U.S. Forest Service, and he would like to present a certificate to the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as you all know, we had quite the event, the 416 fire, which burned 54,129 acres just north of here. And it was a very eye-opening experience for a lot of us in this community. Even having gone through Missionary Ridge, it still just kind of reinforced just how important community really is. When we talk about people, a group of people working unified and working towards a common goal, which is saving homes, saving lives, and saving the forest. And we can't do it alone. I think, we had, I think at the peak, we had 1,200 firefighters in camp. They were not operating alone. It wasn't just 1,200 people that put this fire out and got to control of this and save those homes. It was the community of Durango. And so with that, I wanted to present a certificate of appreciation in recognition for outstanding contribution to the firefighters protecting lives and property on the San Juan National Forest for the 2018 fire season. And so I want to thank you for your support. And again, the community outpouring was staggering. I'd like to just tell you a couple stories that I heard from the firefighters, if I may. There were firefighters that were from out of the area, from California and other places like that were coming up to me and they were saying, this is phenomenal. It wasn't just the cookies that were showing up or anything like that, but the people that were lining 25th Street as the fire engines were coming back from Falls Creek after a long 16-hour shift. At 8 o'clock in the evening, people were there lining the sidewalks, cheering, holding up signs, and just boosting the morale of our firefighters. And they came up to me and they said, Matt, usually the community gives us the impression that we're in the way and that they would like us to leave. And I just thought, I would never want to live in a community like that. And so it's just with a deep sense of pride and satisfaction that allows me to make this certificate to you all. And again, from the Forest Service and the San Juan National Forest and the Columbine Ranger District, our deepest gratitude for all of you guys, for everything that this community has done. And so, and with that, I do want to give you a couple souvenirs.
Well, you know what? Before you do that, I want to let the community know that we are so proud of all the partners that participated and all the fire departments from across the United States. Let's give him a round of applause.
So I'm going to leave these with you. These are some maps of the burn area, and I showed you the PACE map, which was a little frightening, and you can share that with other folks. Okay?
Well, as the mayor, I went to the Type 1 command and met with the commander, and I'll tell you what, it was a scary day. Matt and I talked about it, that boy, they had a plan, and they had a plan B, and they had a plan C to save Durango. And I'm telling you that without their efforts, we were hurting. So I'm just here to say thank you. I get emotional. But I appreciate all of your efforts and all the firefighters from across the United States. Farmington came up. Gosh, I met so many firefighters. And we are very blessed to have, no loss of structures, no loss of life. Everyone pulled together. And that's what Durango does. Durango pulls together. And that's, I've been here 44 years. I've seen a lot of things in those 44. But thank you so much.
And thank you. It's an honor, really. Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
And on that note, I'm going to compliment the city manager. Every morning at 7 a.m., the city manager was at meetings. And we received as a city council communications daily that was going on. That's what we do. We communicate. The city manager was there starting his morning. Other staff from the city staff were also part of it. We have a great command system. Terry Hawker, the police department, people manning the phones out at the volunteer center. All of that is teamwork. And that's really what the Durango is about. And that's what happens up here on this dais, that the city council works together as a team, and the city manager is our coach. So I am here to say thank you, city manager, for all those early mornings and the reports that we receive from all of the staff. So thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Oh gosh, I need some Kleenex. Okay, moving on. We have another presentation from Asphalt Condition Survey by our director, Levi Lloyd. I thought so.
Mayor Marbury, members of council, Levi Lloyd, Director of City Operations. So at the special study session on August 7th, we talked about capital improvements and street improvements, and we touched on the 2013 pavement condition survey that we conducted and was kind of the guiding document for all of our capital improvements projects in the street. During that meeting, Councilor Bettine had requested a summary of the 2018 pavement condition survey that was underway. We got the results of that back last week, so I'm here to present that information to you. So I've titled this Durango Pavement Condition Survey, a Capital Improvement Success Story, because we invested a lot of money in a large capital asset, and I think we did a lot of good things with that money. And I think it's important as we talk about funding capital improvements as we go forward, how we're going to do that. It's important to show the public that we are good stewards of that tax dollar and we're putting it to good use. So just briefly, we're going to talk about a summary of our streets network, a summary of the 2018 pavement condition assessment. We'll touch briefly on the 2013 pavement condition index, the PCI summary, where we spent our tax dollars from 2014 to 2017, and then a summary of the 2018 PCI, and then a comparison of the two, 2013 and 2018. So just briefly, City of Durango has 83 centerline miles of streets. Most of those streets are at least 2 lanes and 2 parking lanes. So essentially multiply that times 4, and that's how many miles of streets we have to maintain as we move forward. Equates to about 14,700,000 square feet of asphalt. Represents an $84 million asset value. And from 2014 through 2017, we invested about $6.7 million in our streets infrastructure. That annual investment is about $1.6 million, or 2% of our total asset value. So the pavement conditions assessment, the summary of that, when we got that, they provided us with a memo talking about the things we did good, some things that still need some work. So our network average PCI in 2018 is a 67, and that's considered good. National average is between a 60 and a 65, so we're slightly above the national average that they're seeing across the country as they're doing these surveys. Our network PCI in 2013 was 64, so we've moved 3 points with that, which doesn't sound like much on the surface, but 3 points in 14 million square feet of asphalt surface is a big improvement. So excellent ranking, streets with a PCI of 85 or better. In 2018, that number is 13.5. And in 2013, it was only 10.8% of our streets were ranked excellent. The recommended goal from the company that does this survey, what they're seeing nationally is roughly 15. So we're just below where we should be on streets that are ranked excellent. So backlog rankings, these are streets that have a PCI of 40 or lower. These are the streets that are in poor condition and need to be upgraded sooner rather than later. So in 2013, we were at 11%, which is below the recommended goal of 10%. And in 2018, we improved that number significantly, and we are now at 8%. And that represents healthy cities that are investing in their infrastructure and realize the importance of their infrastructure is that 10% goal. So this is where we were at in 2013. You can see that basically 63% of our streets were in good to excellent condition. 11% were either poor to very poor, and 37% of our streets were fair to very poor, a big number that we needed to work on. So we use that information in the construction season starting in 2014 through 2017, and this represents all the work, total work that we did in those 4 construction seasons. You can see in 2014, we invested a significant amount in our streets. Construction is about $3.1 million, and it's decreased every year since. So in 2015, it was approximately $1.4 million. And in 2016, it was $1 million, and in 2017, it was $1.1 million. So we made some great big strides right off the bat. We pulled some money from the fund balance to address some of our streets that were in the poorest shape, and then that funding has sort of steadily declined since. So what did that get us? So you can see 65% of our streets now are in that good to excellent ranking, and only 8% of our streets are poor to very poor. And I wanted to sort of back up. If you look at the very poor, it's 0.6% of our streets now. And in 2013, it was 2.7% of our streets were basically failing and beyond their useful life. That is a huge step for the city of Durango. We made some big strides in the first couple years with our reconstructions to get rid of those streets that were in really bad shape. So this is a comparison of all those rankings as we move forward. And want to draw your attention again to those lowest 4, the marginal poor and very poor. So in 2013, 23.5% of our streets, almost a quarter of our streets were either marginal to very poor. Now that number is down to 18%, so we've made strides there. This is where we wanted to see increases, and you can see significant jump in our excellent, our streets that were ranked excellent or better. In 2013, 42% of our streets had that ranking, and in 2018, nearly half of them, 45.3% of our streets now have an excellent or very good to excellent rating. So we made some major strides with our capital improvements dollars in the last 4 years. And that $6.7 million, if we were to, that we've invested since 2014, if we were to now turn around and not spend any money on our streets, represents a stranded investment. So again, if we don't do anything to our streets, we'll lose the ground that we've made over the last 4 years. So it's important that we continue to invest in infrastructure as we move forward. Any questions?
Yes. About $1 million, how much do you need a year to maintain what we're doing?
So what we would,
$2 million?
What we're looking at is for just our standard reconstructs, surface treatments and overlays and ADA ramps, and some storm sewer improvements that go along with those. We're looking at roughly $2 million a year in needs for that. And then we have another $2 million a year in complete streets. And these are the streets similar, Animas View Drive is a good example where we don't have curb gutter sidewalk. The street's in poor condition, needs to be upgraded. We need to make improvements to that. Sawmill is another one. North College is another one where the sidewalks need to be improved. So a complete street is basically going in, new curb gutter, sidewalk, and asphalt surface to bring those streets up to a city standard. So $4 million total to do all those different projects.
Yes, sir.
To supplement some of the information you just received from Mr. Lloyd. I think it's fair to say that most people don't think about these details and how we're spending their money. So I think it's important for us to educate the public on how we're spending their money. And what Levi didn't do, and what we don't do very well as a staff, is pat ourselves on the back. The fact that we do a pavement condition index to give us measurable results is a good management practice that we've been doing now for some years. Unfortunately, there are a few people who perpetuate misinformation, and that just creates public confusion. So we're here tonight to correct that and provide some good information. On those slides where you saw the graph dip, we took money out of the fund balance. That's one-time opportunity. We also had a situation where the franchise tax was defeated in April, and we brought it back in November. So for that period of time, we didn't have those revenues. And the council promised that if they were approved, we'd put it into streets. So that money went back into streets. That's why those numbers show a decline, because we injected one-time revenues into the streets. In the current budget, we have one street project, and that's Thomas Avenue. And unfortunately, the bids came in higher than the engineer's estimate, and we are not going to do that. The real unfortunate situation is this is like the third time we've had to do that for that particular street. Going forward, we are not able to keep up these measurements unless we get more money in the street department. It's as simple as that. We appreciate the good work that Levi and his crew does, but we cannot continue that without supplementing the current revenue source.
And Levi, put that slide back up that shows poor, that one. Okay. So that's 18% are in very poor condition. And would you explain where the revenue comes for to pay for these streets, City Manager?
Well, this is a general fund operation. Most of the general fund is derived from sales tax. And then the other tax that contributes to it would be the property tax. But sales tax is overwhelmingly the largest source of revenue. Then we have a number of miscellaneous fees and charges. We do get some grants. We get a portion of the gas tax, and I believe that's it's about $800,000, which goes into these numbers.
So when people shop online, the city gets no sales tax. And you can see that we are looking at a ballot question because of the revenues. City Manager later will talk about the declining revenue that the numbers were in for June during the 416 fire. So it's not really very good news in terms of the revenue picture. Thank you very much, Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd, I just want to say how impressive that whole presentation was. I wholly expected your report to show a decline given the diminishing amount of funds that we've been able to allocate to the streets department, and what you guys have done with those limited funds is really impressive. So thanks to everybody that's involved in that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for that good communication. And that's one of the goals of City Council, is to communicate with our neighbors. Yes, sir.
And I just want to reiterate the fact that much of that progress is due to the fact that we took the money, the surplus money in the general fund balance, and invested it. And we are now running on the very edge of our allowable margin. And we do not have the revenue to do that again unless we can get additional revenues, which is one of the reasons why we will be having a serious conversation later in the meeting.
About the ballot question, because on the ballot, it's streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, storm drains, the police department, the public safety, code enforcement, infrastructure. So thank you, Levi, for showing us the infrastructure demands and the accomplishments as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to the consent agenda. Ms. Phillips?
Item 4.1 and 4.2 are approval of minutes. 4.1, the study session of July 10th, 2018. 4.2, the regular meeting of August 7th, 2018. Items 4.3 through 4.5 are discussion and possible action items. 4.3 concerns approval of Resolution R 2018-32, confirming an additional appropriation to the general fund to increase the amount budgeted in the Community Support Services budget to operate and maintain a temporary emergency homeless shelter in excess of the amounts budgeted in the 2018 budget. 4.4 concerns approval of Resolution R 2018-33, confirming additional appropriations to the general fund to increase the amount provided to the Parks and Recreation Department staffing to patrol and monitor city-owned open space and trails in excess of the amounts budgeted in the 2018 budget. 4.5 concerns Resolution R 2018-34, authorizing additional appropriation to the sewer fund and to the sewer capital projects fund for the emergency reconstruction of the Santa Rita sanitary sewer line and associated infrastructure. Items 4.6 through 4.8 are final approval of ordinances. 4.6 is ordinance O 2018-17, granting an easement in city-owned property to Cedar Networks for the installation of fiber optic conduit west of Settle Street and declaring an effective date. 4.7 is ordinance O 2018-18, granting La Plata Electric Association an easement located on city-owned property to install new service to the Rivergate development and declare an effective date. And item 4.8 is ordinance O 2018-19, approving the annexation and initial zoning for the Woodside Condominiums addition to the city of Durango and declaring an effective date.
Thank you. Would any city council like to remove an item from the agenda? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call.
Motion.
I'll make a motion to
Oh,
approve the
thanks.
consent agenda.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Councilor White?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Councilor Bricky?
Yes.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes. I would also like to remind anyone, if you're here to speak to the city council tonight for public participation on something that's not on the agenda, you need to come and sign in. And if you're here to talk about one of the items on the agenda and you want to have a public comment, you need to sign in also.
Just for clarity, does that include the discussion of the possible tax resolution?
No, there's no public. That's,
Well, that's,
is it?
I mean, I
Yes.
think,
Oh, yes,
Either
sir.
way.
Yes.
we will take public comment at that time?
No, it's only a resolution, so now would be the time.
Now, all right, so public participation is the appropriate time for those comments. Okay.
Public participation, okay. All right, do you have that one? Thank you very much. This is public participation, so I'll just read the guidelines for you. Thank you. Public participation, this section of the agenda is set aside for the public to provide comments or ask questions regarding items that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. City Council will not respond to questions from the dais. Citizens should address their comments directly to City Council. Citizens wishing to speak during this section of the agenda shall sign in prior to the start of the meeting with your name and address. Citizens will be called by the mayor to the podium. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. The city manager will give you a signal when you have 30 seconds by raising his hand. And if you had any materials, they needed to be submitted to the clerk on or before noon of the day of the meeting. John Simpson, please come to the podium and state your name and address. Thank you.
Mayor Marbury, John Simpson, 1831 Crestview Drive. When copying other people's work, you must be careful who you copy. The wicked problems we keep hearing about center around the contention that general fund revenues will not increase fast enough to keep up with the general fund expenses. Emeryville, California had the same problem. Hartford, Connecticut had the same problem. And in 2012, the city of Golden engaged local citizens in a similar process to come up with ideas to increase revenues and decrease expenses for their gap. This is the chart they used. And a $200 million capital shortfall look familiar? And do any of the authors of Golden's Wicked Problem look familiar? I enjoyed Golden's engage process because citizens carried the workload. I was turned off during Durango's process because from day one, it was clear this was an effort to push a tax. At Durango's first engaged meeting, a smart resident suggested looking at the 2015 sales tax. Staff chose not to report this to council. Instead, council was told of other ideas that would not be practical. An outreach effort designed by staff, evaluated by staff, and reported by staff does not reflect the voice of the people. The tax increase initially was based on wicked problems until it became apparent that there wasn't sufficient support and many assumptions weren't coming true. For example, sales and use tax revenue was up 2.7% through June with the fire, compared to the 0% doom and gloom scenario we were told. Now you have requested the police station lead this tax increase. You are asking taxpayers to fork over $317 million during the next 25 years, assuming a growth rate of 3%. The police station is $17 million, where the other $250 million goes is not clear. I'm willing to assume the police station is the most important structure needed. We need to do this right. Evidence is clear that council has lost control of the capital project planning. If I was the police chief, I would insist to remove the association between the police station and the other wicked problems. The faults of the overall proposal may very well result in the police station getting buried in the rubble of an election defeat. I ask you to be honest in the next few months and discuss what decisions were made to support a tax increase in the 2017 and 2018 retreat, meetings that you chose not to post an agenda on and you chose not to take minutes on, meetings held outside the view of the press and the citizens. I propose a solution that does not burden the families of Durango. Ask taxpayers to reallocate the portion of the revenue collected in the 2005 and 2015 half-cent sales tax that is currently not committed to debt service. If you combine that revenue with the funds that have been built up in the capital projects, we'll get the police station and start important road maintenance projects next April. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. You know, I'm going to respond to you, Mr. Simpson. I read the ballot language for 205, and I read the ballot language for 2015. And it's very specific what the ballot language says the money can be spent on. And nowhere does it say a police station. Nowhere does it say streets. And so you are not correct in your assumption.
I said you have to ask taxpayers. You can have a new ballot initiative where you ask the taxpayers to reallocate the money.
And that's not where we're going to go, Mr. Simpson.
I might point out too, the assertion that there was no minutes and that's just absolute fake news. I mean, there's these meetings, every one of these meetings have been documented. We've heard reports from all the public engagement, and you know, I don't understand what you don't understand about this process and why you would make that, stand up at this podium and make those assertions about the process that this city council has directed and our staff has completed.
And in fact, if you, at our last study sessions, the surveys and the documentation we received, it was from citizens about making cuts, increasing fees for the users of programs, and it also was a combination of raising a little bit of property tax and a little bit of sales tax. And so that's what the city council came up with. And we have listened to people. Now, not everybody's going to vote for it. I know that. But I'm voting for the police department. I don't know where you stand, but I'm voting for the police department, just like I voted for the fire department. And the city of Durango has not raised property taxes since 1982. Except for last year, and that was the fire department. I voted to support the fire department. And it's up to you and your conscience. I know what a Cracker Jack box that is across the street. I have policemen sitting in the back of the room, and I'm sure they have their opinions as well. So I'm going to vote even for the police station. I'm voting for streets. I listened to him talk about streets. I'm voting for storm drains and curbs and gutters. I know exactly what's on that language because it's right here. And so is the 205 and the 215 ballot language. And that's what you use for those items: parks, trails, open space. Wow, interesting. Interesting that you show up and you criticize people up here that give of their time, and you show something from California, and that just doesn't work for me, Mr. Simpson.
I think there needs to be a response. We do have this on tape, so we will respond to the allegations and the accusations. I mean, they're simply false.
You know what? I'm an honest person. Are you an honest person?
I try to think so.
Thank you. I know you are. I know you are. Mr. Patino, are you an honest person?
I think so.
Does that not insult my reputation as a school teacher, as a person of this community? You are. You don't call me dishonest.
Well, it was under 3 minutes. So.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go on since there's nobody else for public participation. Well, the first public hearing is to consider the Durango Mesa Area Plan adoption. And so would staff please come and present. Just stand up there and call me dishonest. Just if you're coming in and you want to speak to the city council on any items on the agenda, I'm going to ask you to sign in. There are legislative and quasi-judicial items, and you might want to be a participant. Just to give everyone a heads up who's just walking in. We want everyone to be able to speak to the city council. Thank you, Vicki. Would you go ahead and start?
Thank you, Mayor Marbury and Council. So this is a public hearing to consider the adoption of the City of Durango's Durango Mesa Area Plan. This plan has been under work for the last 6 months, and it's an update of the Ewing Mesa Area Plan that was adopted back in 2004. The Durango Mesa area is shown in this map. The area is actually a little bit larger than this because this map doesn't have these, there's 2 properties right where I have the pointer, 2 additional private properties, but everything that's in green is all under one ownership, and that's mostly what we were talking about when I'm talking about the history of the property. So, and as you can see, it's located right next to downtown Durango, and it's a really good property. So as for the background, the Ewing family owned the 1,850 acres for a number of years. Oak Ridge Energy purchased the property in 1990, and they wanted to develop the gravel and coal resources, but they also wanted to develop a golf course and a golf course community. And so that sort of became the impetus to the Ewing Mesa Area Plan that was adopted in 2004. And it became an area where everyone thought it was a great place for the city to grow. It didn't have any neighbors. It could accommodate a lot of development, and so it was really slated for urban development. So the plan showed about 2,000 homes, the golf course, which of course started it, the resort area, a business park, and then a large amount of mixed-use land. Well, the property really never got off the ground as far as development along those lines, and as the property passed through the owners of the Oak Ridge Energy Company, there was less and less interest in developing it, and in 2008, they subdivided the property into 56 35-plus acre lots. And they were over 35 acres because that exempted from subdivision regulations, so really they just cut it up into large pieces of property. So in 2015, the Katz family purchased this property, and their vision was to create a regional park on the Mesa, and then ultimately they wanted to give the property to the city of Durango and La Plata County, or at least that's what they were talking about. And some of the things that they brought to the table, and that also that we talked about as during this plan process, was the creation of an outdoor concert venue, a place to move the La Plata County Fairgrounds, a large bike park, active recreation fields, cultural and event centers, and then open space. So the property, when you go up on the property, the first thing that you just really notice is the views. They frame a lot of the plan work that was done and how gorgeous the property is. And it's also actually beautiful in every direction. We started with looking at the slopes, and it's pretty obvious, but from this map, you can see that everything in this area is basically flat or very flat. So this whole lower bench is all very developable, and then all of this upper area is very steep. And so it was sort of a logical break of different types of uses. So the flatlands has been used for grazing, and I think they did do probably some dry farming. And the flatland is really flat. And then around the edges of the mesa, we have a lot of vegetation, a lot more native vegetation. And then there's a transition zone where the two come together. And those are all kind of used in the framework for the plan. The other thing that happened is that they offered, or the property owner offered up the possibility of giving La Plata County land so that they could do their multi-event center, which is what their fairgrounds project became. And this is a copy of their plan. And they went through this process last year, so a year ago. And what we did during our area plan process is we let their plan stand as it is, where it is, and then worked around it. So we really didn't do anything to change the work that they had already put into the plan process. And so the framework for our plan is shown in this diagram. So the event center and the concert event center is really shown on this North Mesa with taking advantage of the great views, the proximity to downtown. The open space area is really slated for all this really steep terrain with an acknowledgement of the trails that are currently already there, and then also trying to maintain the connections between the open space in Horse Gulch and the BLM open space, in addition to the new open space that's being proposed as a part of this plan, or future open space, I should say. The brown is the property that the county has their plans for the event center on it. The southern part is really another flat, very nice flat area that's really for the active recreations. That's what fields are looking at, and also the bike park. And then there's a transition area sort of between the two for some additional uses. Some of the things in there are probably a little less intense. Some ideas that have been thrown out that could be in there would be frisbee golf, perhaps a campground, city campground. So those are some of the ideas that are looking at in that area. We'll talk a little bit more about the conceptual plan in a little bit. This was the framework for the plan. So with any of our plans, we have a section that goes into the objectives and policies of the plan, and I want to just touch on those. First, there's land use, and really we're providing a mix of land that provides for exceptional recreation and cultural experiences, along with natural open space and natural uses. And that gave us the foundation for the future land use map. Now, this is really close to what we already have on our comprehensive plan because we changed it in 2017, knowing this was the direction that we were looking. But this has been modified based on the concept plan that you'll see. So there's 3 different land use categories that are being proposed for the property. Most of it, or a large portion of it, is open space. That's really all of that steep terrain. And then all of the edges of the property where you have all the vegetation and we don't want to do any hillside scarring. And then there's the flat area that's really geared for and the transitional area for the parks and recreation. And then the rural area, this green here, these are the 2 additional private property owners' properties, and they wanted rural. It accommodates their existing use. One of the families has horses on the property, and the other family has a gravel mine. Both of those are allowed under this land use category, and if the property was zoned rural, they would also be allowed under that rural zoning if it was annexed into the city. So this is the proposed future land use map for the Durango Mesa. A couple other plan objectives that we had. One is on sustainability, and it talks about that any development should incorporate the sustainability practices. We talk about arts and culture, not only preserving and protecting significant cultural, historical, and archaeology sites, but then also providing for opportunities for arts and culture facilities up on the property also. Transportation is probably one of the biggest issues to get good transportation up to the mesa. It's a lot about, there's quite a bit of elevation between the mesa and the roads. The current road is right here, the Ewing Mesa Road. It's right here. This is what it looks like. It's in pretty good shape. There does have some issues if the traffic increases that would have to be addressed. So in general, and there's just another picture of it, a couple things that would have to be done as the Mesa develops is one of these two accesses will need to be closed. And then this switchback is a little too tight, and then it's a little steep. So there's some road work that needs to be done on that primary access when we reach a certain level of development up on the Mesa. But right now, for seasonal use, not having winter activities up there, and up to certain levels, they can function as it is. So it's an acceptable road up to certain levels. And there's a phasing plan that's part of this plan that we'll talk about a little bit, little detail. That was sort of worked out with talking to this CDOT and with the city utility departments and with the fire district about where those levels of development should be and what should be triggered as to improvements. The other thing that we'll talk about, let me get to the slide. So this is the main axis, and it's really the only axis being proposed as a part of this plan. So transportation goal, we also have objectives for goals, which really tries to emphasize using other forms of transportation besides single occupancy vehicles. We really want to try to de-emphasize cars and increase the opportunity for pedestrians, bicycles, transit. And I think we've even got a gondola in there somewhere. So it's just ideas. Transportation also talked a little bit about multimodal, which I just talked about. There's definitely a real push for that. And also for parking, and only really park what you need and allow for more creative parking solutions. Clearly the concert venue would probably have just temporary parking, so it doesn't have to be improved to the same levels that we would in an urban environment. So that's all kind of outlined in this portion of the plan. Emergency access is going to be an issue eventually up here. We will need to have a second access. This is one option that's being discussed. It's not the only option. It's just one that we've had some conversations with the property owner, and that's the Bonds family that owns this property in here, and they already have a road that goes up to the top of the Mesa. And it needs some work to meet an emergency access, but for a gated emergency access, it's a good possibility. And they've actually expressed some potential interest in some working with the property owners about possibly that could be an access. There's also one down by the gravel pit. They mentioned that, that might be in the future when the gravel pit stopped working. There might be an issue. They're also already up to the top of the Mesa. And then there's some other locations that, again, there could be an access. But these are the ones that we've had conversations about. Another thing that'll happen eventually when there's enough development up on top that you have to actually improve the intersection with Ewing Mesa Road and Highway 3. And the plan, our consultants from Russell Engineering looked at what it would take to do those intersection improvements, and they are proposing or recommended actually to come with a traffic circle here or a roundabout. It's a cheaper option and it saves a lot of space and it doesn't require a lot of retaining walls. So that's recommended in the plan. Again, these are all just ideas. Everything would have to be studied with a real engineering study and a lot more detail. But it's something that I thought was interesting that you might want to see as an idea on how to deal with it. Other objectives, obviously it's Parks and Rec. There's several in here, but again, it's just really providing for some really nice opportunities to do additional Parks and Recreation facilities. Trails are huge. There's also a real need for some single-use trails or single-purpose trails. So like equestrians are off by themselves, bike riders can be on their own trails, and runners and hikers can be on different trails. And so this plan accommodates that in some of those open space areas or those more rugged areas. And then open space, obviously, they want to prioritize open space, wildlife, and low-density use in those open space areas. So all of this was wrapped together and put into, well, let me finish this one. Utilities is another big issue, sorry about that. Water, of course, is going to be an issue to get up on top of the Mesa, although they do have a well right now that works. And we can do some water storage, either using that well through either a pond or a tank. And then, so when we need fire suppression, there'll be some opportunity for it. Ultimately, water and sewer lines will have to go up top to the Mesa and serve it. But those are probably down the road a number of years until you really start doing the more built part of the plan. And then stormwater just talks about best practices, really it's what we do in the city everywhere. So all this was put together into a conceptual plan, and I'm going to actually turn this over to Kevin, who wanted to kind of walk you through the conceptual plan, which is sort of like the next level of development, a little bit more than we normally do. And I'm going to turn it to Kevin.
Good evening, councilors. Kevin Hall, Assistant City Manager. So as Vicki pointed out, we've been at this really in earnest for 6 months, but probably closer to a year in terms of trying to put together a plan process. And I wanted to make a couple of call outs. One is the Lower Foundation out of Santa Fe provided a $100,000 grant that really allowed for this planning to occur. And as Vicki pointed out, this is somewhat of a non-typical area plan because it's got a lot more detail in it than we would typically see in an area plan. But because of the unique nature of the property, the Lower Foundation grant, and certainly the interest of the Katz family, and Mark Katz and Maura Compton are here representing the family tonight, and I think Mark maybe want to share a couple words a little bit later. So I just wanted to call them out, and then just talk in general about what you see here up on the screen, and I don't know that our pointer works real well except for over here. What I wanted to do is just walk you through in general what's going on the south end of the mesa, and then work our way to the north to give you the kind of the overview of what Vicki talked about in general. But really the idea is that there's a lot of different facilities that can go up here over time, and the area plan will allow it to occur with a great deal of flexibility in the future if things change. But how this would work would be like any typical development project where you would identify one particular aspect of the plan project that you want to complete, and you'd have to go into further engineering study to understand costs, implications of whether that's the exact right location, what the amenity breakdown is, and that sort of thing. So really, the whole mesa is really set up that way in this plan so that it can be done incrementally over a long period of time rather than trying to establish it all at once. The county facility is a little bit different. There's about 200 acres associated with that, and while they can phase in, it's one of those things where they really can't open the doors until they have done a significant amount of infrastructure improvement. A lot of the initial conversations that went into the development of this area plan and this concept plan was about how can the community collectively work together to open up the property and make it functional use for the community with kind of reasonable incremental investments of whether it's Parks and Rec dollars or whether it's foundation money, GOCO money, other community money. This is a classic 3P, if you will, a private-public partnership, in that the property owners have expressed interest in providing the property to the community, and the community will need to step forward in terms of developing the facilities up there. And the way we approached this, again, was to try to go slow out of the gates, create a plan that is implementable over the long period of time. So we shouldn't think we're going to anticipate seeing this all come together in the next couple of years. But what we have done is set the framework for it to happen over really many years to come. And there are certain things that are prioritized sooner than others. And a lot of it had to do with the community's interest in certain aspects, whether it be a bike park or some of these equestrian facilities, or certainly the use of the property for cultural events, music events. And in fact, just this last weekend was Meltdown on the Mesa, so much smaller scale, but certainly the types of things that the property owners and the stakeholders have expressed interest in doing. So at the south end of the property, I'll just walk you through briefly what has been envisioned working with the community. There's a range of things. Certainly the bike park issue is one that's been talked about for a number of years in the community. The bike park in this particular plan really has a significant amount of land to work with, which is something the community hasn't had up to this point. So it kind of changes the dynamic of what the design might be. A lot of area, a lot of terrain up in this area, but also the types of things you would see at some of the other facilities around the state and nation that are kind of, if you will, say, state-of-the-art contemporary bike parks. Along with that, there's a dog park envisioned down in this area. There's also some other facilities that go along with mountain recreation, possibly some indoor buildings. And again, because this is a concept plan, these things could modify over time, but this is what's been envisioned. At the south end, there is going to be a need for additional ball fields in the future based on the survey work that was done by Parks and Rec as part of the Parks Open Space Trails Recreation Master Plan update. So that's kind of been set aside for that type of use. Then you come into the middle area, and now you're into the county facility, which there's no timeline on development of that right now, but we really wanted to work within the framework of that plan. And we did that, and we worked very closely with La Plata County to ensure that it met kind of the marriage between the types of uses could work together in the area plan. A lot of connectivity into the open space for what are referred to as specific use trails. There's been a lot of folks in the community who want to go hiking that would like hiking-only trails. There's been people expressing interest in equestrian-only trails, and certainly the biking-only trails is another one. So that will be another area that will be looked at in the future as to what is possible. This would be a good example of an area that could possibly occur with a very limited investment and with a lot of bang for your buck, if you will. Further to the north then is where you get into the area that Vicki was talking about. This is really the southern meadow of Horse Gulch, or you could call it the northern meadow of the Katz property. And the intent was to really try to preserve the area as it currently exists today in open space without a lot of development in it. There is some minimal improvements proposed that include things like Frisbee golf, and then there potential for a campground that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. A lot of ridgeline comes in here, but then this is the area that I think really piqued the interest of the Katz family and a lot of folks in the community, where there's just a range of possibilities for cultural events and music events. Certainly the way the meltdown in Mesa has occurred over the last 4 years is you bring it all in for the weekend, you take it all away, and it goes away. And that could continue for many years to come, but the way the plan was set up was really to identify places for permanent facilities that would allow for kind of those intimate gatherings for smaller venue events, and then possibly even some very large events that could occur down at the very northwest side of this. And what's represented here is a very large concert venue, and this could be a similar situation where it's kind of special event turnkey. They bring it in, they take it away. But certainly the plan envisions a larger amphitheater sometime in the future. With all of this, there's the need for parking, need for utilities, good access, and as Vicki pointed out, emergency access. So looking at those things and how those could be done in a manner that would allow for some incremental use early on without the significant utility and infrastructure investments early on. And I think the plan does a good job of that, and that is really something the Lohr Foundation was interested in helping us kind of work through. So with their funding, we were able to do so, and I think we got a lot more plan than we would have anticipated if we had just updated the area plan that was previously in place for the previous owners. You know, this is really a unique legacy property, and the fact that it's almost all one owner makes it so different than what we have in the balance of our area plans, where you have just myriad of ownerships. In this case, 1,850 acres out of the 1,900 plus acres is one owner. You know, again, on funding issues, you know, I think it's recognized that it's going to take a community effort. It's going to take money from outside. It's going to take the advocates who want certain things to step forward to make some of these things happen. It's not a simple matter of the city just doing these all on their own. And I think that the planning team, which included Parks and Rec, Russell Engineering, Zaharan, certainly the Katz family with Maura at the table almost at every meeting, and Trails 2000 and some other stakeholders, I think we've kind of accomplished what we were set out to do, knowing that this is a very long-term plan with the desire to work through it incrementally moving forward, and I think we're there. So adoption of the plan was really the next step. So now we have the county's facility plan completed, the area plan for the city's community facility completed, and now we can start talking about the details as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Mr. Katz, did you want to say anything?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks to the council and to city staff for having me to talk about this. I'm Mark Katz. I'm the current owner of the property and obviously a major proponent of creating a regional park there. That's really the whole reason that I bought the property in the first place. So I really appreciate the work that Pedro Campos and his team and all the city staff and all the organizations that met in the process of making the plan and the public meetings. And the result is a plan that is, you know, like my original vision, but better because it's more refined and it's received a lot of input from a lot of people who thought about things that I had never thought of. And I think it's a fine plan for a park that, you know, will further quality of life in our area and also has the ability to really have positive effect on economic development in our area. We all know that we need additional revenue in our area to make up for declining revenues from oil and gas revenue, et cetera, et cetera. This park has the potential to host music, sports, ag, equestrian events, and other kinds of events that will bring people to Durango along with their dollars. Neighboring communities like Telluride have used this approach very successfully. And for example, this fall we will be hosting on the property the NICA Colorado High School Mountain Biking State Championship race for all of Colorado. Was that October 25th?
October 20th.
October 20th. This event will bring in 700 mountain bike racers, this is a high school mountain bike racers, and their families. So estimated about 2,500 people will travel to town. Also estimated they would spend $100 a day, or $200 for about $500,000 of additional revenue that would flow into town from this one event. The Durango Mesa Park, as it's envisioned, has the potential to host many such events: summer concerts, bike and running races, horse shows, agricultural events, weddings, etc., etc. Possibilities are nearly endless once we have a place to host these kind of events. We've never had a place. There's never been a place to do summer music festivals, and Telluride does them every weekend. We don't do them at all because we don't have a place for it. The plan is phased, and a lot can be done even in the very earliest, cheapest phases of the plan. But there's no way to avoid the issue that some funding will be needed to implement the plan. And before the Katz family transfers the property to the city and county, we really need to have a solid plan in place for funding the development and understanding where that funding is going to come from. We need to work together. Now that we have this wonderful plan for the Mesa Park, the hard work of determining how to fund and build the park needs to start. And I am happy to work with the council, and I urge us both to work with determination and urgency towards making the plan a reality.
Thank you, Mr. Katz. City Manager, was there anyone who signed up to speak? I'm going to open the public testimony. Just for the people that came in late, if you wanted to speak on the Durango Mesa plan or any of the items on the agenda tonight, then you need to sign in.
It was just Mark.
Okay. Well, then, I open the public testimony. I'm closing the public testimony. And are there questions by council or comments?
Well, I would just like to thank the Katz family. Mark's here tonight, and thanks for your presentation. Just to even have an opportunity to consider funding something of that magnitude is extraordinary. I think I would encourage anybody who's watching at home or anybody that's here tonight that hasn't looked at the plan online. You can find it at durangogov.org. It's extraordinary. Looking at the aerials of the plan you'll realize pretty quickly that the size of this property is literally almost the size of Durango itself. And to envision the idea of having a recreational and diverse amenity of this magnitude adjacent to our community is just, it's so extraordinary. It's almost mind-boggling. I was reading the plan recently and just was getting giddy about it. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It'll take years and years, but as Mark said, I think I'm certainly anxious to get engaged in the funding and planning process as quickly as we can, because it's something that I think there is no parallel to it that I'm familiar with for a community of our size. It will be something really magnificent. So thank you so much for that opportunity.
Anyone else?
Ditto.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Well, yeah, thanks, Mark. Come a long ways. It's not been that long, but it's been long enough, and I'm really happy to see this tonight and make it somewhat official and look towards the funding sources that can make this thing come to reality. So, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I would agree, and thank you again, all of you, for the work. It will obviously be a huge asset to our community, and I too look forward to having conversations with council about how we might start next steps and looking into the funding. I appreciate Commissioner Kim Baxter's effort at bringing funding into the plan. On the last page, noted, page 55, but it was in there and it was good discussion. And I look forward to continuing those discussions and possibly taking this larger plan into a next steps for a 5-year plan. And what do we do? How do we get there? And where does that bring us? So I hope that we can do that together soon.
Thank you. And I have to say that the Katz family, to me, they are the Santa Clauses of Durango. That's how I have felt from day one when I learned about this program, that you have such a legacy in Durango. And so thank you so much for all that you are offering to the future. That's the future of Durango, and the economic impact will be dynamic. So thank you for all that you've done for our community. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing and look for a motion from City Council.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Durango Mesa area plan adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Counselor Bookie?
Yes.
Counselor Patine?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes. Moving on to 8.2.2, it's a public hearing to consider the Rivergate Medical Campus Expansion Variance and Final Development Plan, Lot 3 of Rivergate Plan Development. I'll look for a staff report to open.
I'm going to excuse myself from this due to a conflict.
Okay, bye.
So I will.
Go into
So excuse or recuse?
recuse.
Okay.
Recuse.
Just
Gotcha.
check.
Thank you. And Ms. Bailey?
Good evening, Mayor Marbury and councilors. Heather Bailey, planner with Community Development, here this evening to talk about the proposed final development plan for expansion of the Rivergate Medical Campus, which is proposed for Lot 3 in the Rivergate Plan Development. To set the stage of what we are talking about, on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the zoning in this particular area. You'll see there's a lot going on. We have light industrial, commercial general, rural ag, open space. The property is within a planned development, which has its own specialized set of standards, all of which is in the river corridor overlay zone, so there's lots of things to consider. On the right-hand side, you have the particular property that we are talking about within the Rivergate development. At the time of approval of the plan development, it went through conceptual and preliminary plans with the understanding that after the first 2 phases, which is what has been there since the original approvals, that there would probably be necessary for some modifications to the initial conceptual plans. And one of the things that you can see there on the right-hand side, I left it so you can kind of see through, is there's some parking on Lot 3 to address some of the parking needs that are on the initial phase for the Rivergate Medical Campus. So the conceptual and preliminary PD was approved in 2003, and since then, nothing else has happened. So it's been a long road to finally get to this point. As part of this process, Planning Commission approved height variance, which was conceived of at the time of conceptual, and so the PD agreement made granting the height variance to Planning Commission as part of their review of any future site plans. And they recommended conditional approval of the proposed final development plan to City Council. The review framework that we're using to evaluate this proposal is partly specified in the plan development agreement, but the PD also makes reference extensively to the land use and development code. So there's a lot of parity between this development and other types of proposed developments. For the design review, the PD agreement called for architectural consistency within the development, so it ends up establishing a sense of place. So this is making very strong reference to the current building of Animas Surgical, but it's still obviously differentiated. It's using a lot of similar elements there. But with the new building, we're talking about 73,000 square feet of proposed medical office building. It will be 3 stories tall. There is an attached 2-story parking structure. The parking structure both addresses the parking needs of this student development and the deficit of parking from the previous development. We'll get into those details. Here are some elevations for what we're looking at in terms of the proposed building. Due to this partly being in the River Corridor Overlay District, there are some pretty extensive requirements for landscaping. This site is going through a review from city landscape architects, and they have a landscape architect as part of the development team to design the site. The parking deck is an open structure, but rather than just have it as an open parking lot, they are doing street trees there on that upper parking structure, and also screening it around the perimeter, again, with some really extensive landscaping. For public improvements, as part of developing this particular property, we were looking at a couple of elements. They are going to widen Sawmill, introduce new on-street parking there along Sawmill, provide access to the upper level of the parking structure off of Sawmill, so we'll take some of the traffic off of just coming in on Rivergate and direct traffic further down Sawmill. There's going to be curb gutter, sidewalk, street trees. On the what is the southern border of the property, there's also curb gutter, sidewalk, and landscaping for the potential in the future of what is currently a private road at some point in the future becoming a public right-of-way. For parking, the original development that we know of as Animas Surgical, at the time of approval, met the parking requirements that were in the code and in the PD agreement. Since then, our code has changed, the way we evaluate land uses has changed, and we have different parking requirements. So if we were using our requirements today, current Animas Surgical is short 17 spaces. They met the approvals at the time, but if you've been out there midday, you know there's not enough parking out there. There's a reason why they created that additional surface parking lot, and even then, they need more parking. So this new phase of development, they are meeting the parking requirements for that phase. They are addressing the parking deficit, looking at this as an entire campus, and also creating new on-street parking so that they are going above and beyond. They're also providing 7 additional spaces above all of those on the site. So we are looking at this as creating a workable site and also to mitigate any impacts to neighboring properties. So, possible motions, approve the Rivergate Medical Campus expansion with conditions and findings in the staff report. And you'll see that there are several conditions, some of them that staff started with and some that Planning Commission recommended as to be included as well, or deny or continue. At this point, here are the conditions of approval. They need to secure secondary emergency access easements for both this phase and the original phase was supposed to secure emergency access and promised that they would, and then it didn't happen. That needs to happen. So we're making that a condition of approval. They are in negotiations with the adjacent property owner to secure that. Final site plan approval by city staff. City staff feels very confident about this proposal. There's still some fine-tuning details that need to happen. Amendment of the initial traffic study to make sure that the additional traffic that was anticipated back in 2003, that we are making appropriate modifications to deal with existing conditions. And so we are coordinating with CDOT on that. The development shall become a member of the Rivergate Plan Development Master Association. So we're recommending that be a process that they go through. Development shall include electric vehicle charging stations and the parking structure. That came about as part of the discussion with Planning Commission. And then all verbal, graphic, and written representations of applicants and their agents are deemed conditions of approval. Staff is recommending approval of this final development plan. There are representatives of the developer here to speak on details, unless you have questions of staff at this time.
Not at this time. All right, with that, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to say anything?
Good evening, councilors. My name is Dan Burkhardt with Burkhardt Planning and Permitting, 17 Lizard Head Drive. On behalf of MedVest, we'd like to thank Heather for giving yet another great presentation and covering all of the bases as we see fit. With that, I really have nothing more to present, but we have several members of the development team here to answer any questions if you have any.
Well, thank you. If you're concluded, I'm going to open the opportunity for public testimony, and several people have signed up. So I'm going to be calling up people. I need you to come to the podium and state your name and address and address the city council. Donna
Sorry.
Nazaro. Thanks, Donna.
Hi, everybody. Donna Nazario. I'm the operations manager at Rivergate Lofts. That's 555 Rivergate Lane. And, I've met with the development staff several times over the last year. And, I think they are doing everything they can for parking issues, because that whole area has been an issue since it was built, as we all probably are aware. I think my concern is the traffic flow. The main road coming in off Sawmill that cuts the two properties up, Rivergate Place, I think is what it's called. It's very narrow. It's already such a small road, and we already have such problems, and this development isn't happening yet. So I was glad to hear in the earlier conversation about improvements in general, and that Sawmill was one of the curb and gutter. And so I am aware that you guys are going to widen, I believe, and make a turning lane into the parking structure and whatnot. My concern is visibility at that intersection. Right now there's trees, and I saw in the landscape plan there's going to be trees, but you can't see out into Sawmill, and the speed limit is 35, I believe now, and everybody flies down there. But that's just my concern, is to really get the traffic flow, because unfortunately I think it would have been so nice if they had a south access into the parking garage as well as off Sawmill, because it's just I think it's gonna be super congested at that intersection, and everybody trying to access the underground parking lot that's existing and then the new one. And so that's just something I want to see, made, studied more, or, see how we can utilize it and make it as safe as possible.
Thank you,
for all
Donna.
the residents, because there's
Tom.
probably 200 people coming in and out of just the lofts alone. And so anyway, I don't know if anybody can speak into that, but that's my concern.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Tom Dugan. Mr. Dugan? And Mr. Dugan, please state your name and address at the podium.
Sure. My name's Tom Dugan, and my office address is 858 Main Avenue, Unit 205. And I'm here as attorney for Carroll Ventures, Inc., which is the company that owns the property to the southeast, immediately adjacent to the subject property. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this evening. I have with me Stan Mason, who is an officer of what I call CVI, Carroll Ventures, Inc. If there are questions that are directed to the property specifically. He's an architect and he knows a lot more of those kind of details than I. Carroll Ventures, Inc. formerly was Red Barn Lumber, if somebody remembers that far back. So they've owned this adjacent property since 1983, and it's called the Simon subdivision, and there's 2 lots, and lot 1 and lot 2. They've been owned both by CVI since 1983. And by way of background, CVI has in process in the city a boundary adjustment request because over the years, with the common ownership of these 2 lots and 1 tenant at times, buildings were built over the lot line. And so the request is to move the line slightly so that the buildings are on the right user's lot now. So as far as the specific application in front of you tonight, CVI doesn't have any problem in general with the project and the proposed development. CVI is a little concerned about access issues to the extent they impinge on or encroach on CVI's property. Condition number 1, COA number 1 of the recommendation for approval is to obtain a emergency access, and it didn't say from whom, but that's from CVI. That's who it's requested of. And CVI has been in negotiation with MedVest to accomplish that. It's not quite finished, but I feel confident it could be. And that discussion involves a 30-foot wide emergency access, the 30 feet being on CVI's property, immediately off the subject property. In the course of the boundary adjustment application, there has been a request or discussion of CVI as part of the boundary adjustment request, dedicating a wider access to the city. It's a little unusual in my experience for a slight boundary adjustment to be talking about dedicating property to the city, but nevertheless, the request has been to dedicate it for the top part, right adjacent to the subject property, for immediate dedication, and the bottom part for an offer of dedication. I take that to mean one's going to be public relatively immediately, and the other perhaps down the road, excuse the pun, when the city accepts that part of the dedication. So there are questions regarding, who puts in all the things that need to happen to transform this into a public road. But maybe those things can be discussed during the boundary adjustment application. But for tonight's purposes, CVI just wants to go on the record saying that if the city's ultimate goal is to have a 60-foot wide public street, the current proposal is to have 45 feet of that on CVI's property and only 15 on the MedVest side. And CVI thinks it would be logical and fair to have that 30 feet on each side. So that would change the MedVest plan or plat by increasing that 15 feet to 30 feet on their side. And then the 30 feet on the CVI side would be consistent with the emergency access that we're conceptually agreeable to. And at whatever point it's logical, it would become a public street. So I jammed a lot in here in a few minutes, and I just thought it was appropriate. It's unfortunate we couldn't talk about both applications at the same time in front of the city council, but at least when the boundary adjustment comes, you will at least have had a heads up about what our concerns are.
Thank you, Mr. Dugan.
Any questions?
I think we may look at the plat in a little bit and get
Take a look at
clarification
that.
exactly how that fits
Right.
in the picture. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Mr. Mason prepared a little statement and a map that shows the 15 and 15, the 30 and 30 on each side. Could I enter that into the
Certainly.
record?
Give it to,
You
Ms.
made 10
Phillips.
copies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Burkhart, you had spoken previously and signed up. I just wanted to make sure. I need to close the public testimony, and you will have a chance as the applicant to come back. Just want to let you know that. Okay. So seeing no one else on the program here, I'm going to close public testimony and ask for questions by council.
Well, my first question would really be to see if someone from the city might address comments from Mr. Dugan relative to any issues foreseen in the planning process. Just so we might have some clarity, since that's new information to the council.
That's very appropriate. So I'm going to ask the staff to come back.
But could I add one question to
Certainly.
that? With
Yes.
the same staff probably, and that is, Mr. Nazario's question about traffic flow, if we can just get a snapshot of exactly how we enter and exit this property, and that'll dovetail with what Chris's question is.
Yes.
And so we can look at all that and
Certainly. So all of those are concerns of city staff as well. Our engineers have reviewed several iterations of this project over the course of about a year at this point. And so we've had multiple discussions and reconfigurations of where the access could and should be. There will be a requirement for no trees blocking a visibility triangle. We don't want to have landscaping that endangers people's lives. So the landscaping will be done in such a way where it will not hinder the visibility triangle. In terms of the traffic flow and are the street improvements meeting requirements in such a way that addresses public safety needs, that is part of the amendment to the initial traffic study that CDOT has requested, that the city has requested. So we have, our engineers have looked at both where to locate the access for the parking deck. One of the original proposals had been for 2 different accesses. We thought the second access, which is, the direction on the left is north. This is the way it fit best on the screen. That a second access over here was too close to what is currently a private road and would not be safe. So we agreed on an access that is a little bit more centrally located, that pulls traffic away from this intersection and also pulls traffic away from this intersection, again, for safety issues.
so just to clarify,
yes,
you're
sir.
coming straight in off of Sawmill into the parking garage.
You can, so for the upper level, you'd be coming in straight off of Sawmill. There's no circulation between the upper level of the parking deck and the lower level of the parking deck. In order to get to the lower level of the parking deck, you need to come down Rivergate Place and come down into the development.
Got it.
They're at 2 different levels. So it is going to be pulling traffic into a different location. There's going to be more traffic on Sawmill, but not necessarily, not all of the new traffic is going to be going down into Rivergate Place.
So is there a sign that says lot full and go down or go up, or that seems a little?
We have not requested that.
No, I'm just kidding.
I say if you've been out there, I know I've done that, where I've gone through the parking structure at Current and Surgical to see what was available there before I went up to go see what was available in the surface parking.
Just seems a little circuitous when the lot is full, but then they have to go back out on a Sawmill, come re-enter the site, and a big bunch of wagon training going on.
And you had a question about CVI?
I did. I just wanted her to address any concerns relative to the presentation Mr. Dugan gave of obtaining those access, and he mentioned a 60-foot development of that roadway. And can you address any of those comments?
So that is a project that City Council will be hearing here in the near future. What he has presented, it sounds factual. That is not my project. So you will be hearing these details here in the near future, and they are most appropriately addressed as part of the review of that project. In terms of the discussion about 15 feet of right-of-way that was dedicated from the Rivergate development, that happened in 2003 as part of the original plan development. Again, with the anticipation of that private drive eventually at some point in the future becoming a public right-of-way. So that process already happened 15 years ago. And it is currently, so if you look at, there's a little stretch here-ish that the city already owns. It was dedicated to the city. It is the city's property now, 15 feet wide.
And Mr. Dugan wants to be 30-30?
Again, that would be a part of their boundary adjustment proposal that you should be seeing in a month.
Can you highlight on the screen there the boundary and what's CVI property, what's...
Okay, so this is probably the best view right here. So this is the property that we are discussing right now, tonight. This is their properties that...
the old red barn.
That CVB is talking about. And you see this stripe that goes down along here? That was dedicated to the city as public right-of-way back in 2003 as part of the original approval of the Rivergate plan development. So you see this is public here.
And that's fully contained on the Rivergate side of that?
Well, it was at the time in 2003 because they were initiating their development and dividing up the different parcels. And as part of that process, with their subdividing the property, we asked for a dedication of that 15-foot wide strip along the southern boundary of their property.
So in this plan, the upcoming lot line adjustment is going to move that 30 feet southward
Where?
onto CVI
CVI.
property.
I believe that is the proposal. Again, I think we should discuss that during the public hearing of that particular proposal with the planner who's managing that project and the details that will be in the staff report.
Okay, so I understand fully now what Mr. Dugan's talking about, and yeah, it just means a further taking or commitment on their part to make a 60-foot right-of-way, should that ever be desired. Or so it kind of is you mentioned a CDOT traffic study. I mean,
An initial traffic. So there was an initial traffic study for the development that was approved in 2003. Even with that initial traffic study, there was an amendment filed for the first 2 phases within the development. We are asking for an additional amendment, again, to address the current site conditions of what is going on out in this neck of the woods,
okay,
and then what is being proposed for this particular property.
so the implications of that would be, I mean, Sawmill Road is a county road, not a, or a, you know, it's not a CDOT jurisdiction road. It's the traffic increase at the intersection.
That will impact, that will impact Highway 3.
Yeah. So they aren't worried about turning radiuses and things like that, all that, they don't dictate anything relative to
And
Sawmill.
in terms of within the development itself,
Well, and or Sawmill Road.
they are concerned about the impact to that particular intersection, yes.
So Sawmill Road is within their jurisdiction,
The intersection of Sawmill, well, and I think you can see it up here.
Right, which is-
Where, yes.
off the map. So, yeah, I mean, the direct the intersection of, on this site plan is not part of CDOT's jurisdiction, just the lighted intersection at either end of Sawmill Road.
Yes, they will need to address, as part of the amendment, the traffic flow that would be coming in and out of this addition to the development.
Right.
Now, having said that, so they have an engineer who could perhaps provide additional detail to what they are including in the amendment. But our engineers as well are looking at the impact of this particular project.
So if they had a negative impact, that would be possibly additional improvements to those two intersections on the county road, or the state highway, not the,
As a hypothetical, yes, potentially.
yeah. Okay.
Any more questions from council?
Yeah, I've got several. As long as we're on this subject, supposing that the half of the 30-foot right-of-way would actually come from the Rivergate property, my back-of-the-envelope calculation, that's probably, that 15 feet is 8 parking places on each deck.
Now, I want to say, we are not asking for any additional dedications or offers of right-of-way on the southern end of this property.
Okay, so basically it is up to the developer and the neighbor to sort that out.
Yes and no. What is between this particular development and their neighbor to the south is securing an emergency access easement, because the road that is located to the south of them is a private drive. It is not a public road. So that is all that we are requiring of this particular proposal.
So what would trigger development of that into a full right-of-way?
Well, that is what you will hear in a month. It would be the development of the parcels to the south.
Okay. But nothing having to do with this project, except for emergency access.
So I guess my question goes back to the boundary adjustment. That's not going to impact tonight's discussion?
No, there is nothing tied to this particular project that there will be impacts if the lots south of them develop, existing conditions change. But in terms of approval and review of this particular project, we need to treat it as it currently is. And so as it currently is, what we are requiring is a secondary emergency access easement off of the south. Now with that, in terms of roadway, part of that, this is, some of it is dirt and gravel. We are requiring this particular development to put in curb and gutter and asphalt so that emergency vehicles can safely get in and out of this private drive if they need to.
Just, what if CVI didn't grant the boundary adjustment?
Or you couldn't go forward with the plan.
If they didn't grant emergency access?
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. We're making that a condition of approval for us releasing a building permit.
So I think it's a pretty big issue to work out. I mean, I don't have an issue with it, but that is the issue.
Should it be a condition of approval then?
We are recommending it as a
It
condition
is.
of approval.
Okay.
It is, but we're not going to discuss the terms of it because it's between the
All
two parties. So I'm just curious about how that would go down. Thanks for kind of illuminating it. It's a little bit convoluted because.
It is.
Yeah, but it does make sense. They've got to negotiate that among themselves. And once they do, they may negotiate the giving of additional adjustments if the road does this or that. They can put that all in their own agreements. So we don't really have to be a party to that conversation, but I was just kind of curious what they were getting at.
Anything else from council?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One of them concerns lighting. And that is the fact that the deck stands so far above the river and the trail, and in fact properties across the river. I noticed in the illustrations that these are absolutely full cutoff fixtures, but if they're sitting up there, does the plan consider the fact that that light is still shining down toward the river trail, and towards neighbors across the river?
So yes, to a certain extent, there is the requirement that any of the lighting on the development is dark sky compliant, so having full cutoff. There's also extensive landscaping required to provide additional screening, including there is the landscaping that is on the upper level of the parking deck itself. There is the landscaping that wraps around the parking deck, also to mitigate. There is also the first phase of animated surgical that will be standing in between the parking deck and the river corridor.
Yeah. But it's only covered, there's still a part of that goes out to the southwest where that building would not
Fully screened. Yeah.
shadow. I will raise this, I think I know the answer already, but that the new glass facade on the entryway could have that same issue with indoor lights simply shining out. But my perception is that that really is shadowed by the building across the street, and that would not become an issue.
Yes, I would agree with your assessment.
Okay. My other question concerns something that did come up in the Planning Commission hearing, which concerned the possibility of solar panels. And looking again at the design, I don't think you want solar panels right up to the second floor windows, which would be probably less than appealing. But by just rough estimate, half of that parking lot is a half an acre. And the idea of putting solar panels over parking lots is not uncommon. And it would, by my rough estimate, generate possibly $18,000 worth of power per year. Don't know what the investment cost would be for that, but there's still a 30% tax credit. And my back of the envelope calculation made that come out to be, I believe it was something under 10, so probably 8 years or so. And I would, this is sort of something that came up to me this afternoon, and I'm loath to start talking about an extra condition of approval, but I really hope that staff and the developer would consider the possibility of helping to meet the city's climate protection goals by generating 100 kilowatts or more, whatever could be generated. That's my back of the envelope estimate. Depending on, and the other thing is there's ballpark half an acre of rooftop. And I don't think all of that would be taken up by mechanicals. And so I really would urge the developers to think very seriously about the potential of solar power and the value that has to the owners for the long term. I mean, the payback is less than 10 years, I'm sure of that. But that then keeps paying back forever to the developers, and we are living in a summer of climate change with fires here, fires everywhere else, and our emissions that come, and if you're powering with a lot of electric power, a lot of that power is coming from coal-fired power plants, which is polluting the environment in general and helping to contribute to future climate change. So the value to the community as well as to the project from having solar power on this project is significant. And I would urge the applicants to think very, very seriously about how that might be incorporated into the design. It has the advantage also of providing shade in the summer, which in this climate is useful. I couldn't guess what the complications is in terms of snow management, because you're going to have snow on the deck in the wintertime, you'll have snow on the solar panels, where does it melt, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an engineering issue, but I really think it's worth considering.
Thank you, Counselor. Sir?
I agree with Dick. The one thing I'm curious to find out about is how the street trees are going to be planted on the upper roof deck as well, in between
So
the solar.
it is, well, let me get to,
So
yes,
I'm
heading in the wrong direction.
supportive
Okay,
of the concept.
so,
I just don't know how the reality is going to happen.
Yes, and this comes from the work of a licensed landscape architect. So there are planter boxes that are in between these parking stalls here. And so they end up creating a wide enough space, but more particularly a long continuous space for the roots to be able to spread out in. Our city arborist has looked at it. Their landscape architect and our landscape architects have looked at their proposed. Essentially, these are very large planter boxes up here, 2 of them up on the upper level of the parking deck.
And the staff required that?
Actually, the code requires open surface parking to have landscaping. We discussed with them the means to meet the code requirements.
It's great. I mean, you gotta do it in any asphalt parking lot, and this is equivalent to that, and
And there's a watering system?
Yes,
Different.
it will be different.
Well,
that's
I
part
have
of
one,
Yeah, one
one
more
final
question?
thought, one
Yes, sir.
final thought that was down at the bottom of my notes.
Okay.
It's, I know this was raised at the planning commission also, but knowing the level of grief experienced by the owners of the Rivergate lofts because of geotechnical as well as building construction issues, it's worth asking again about any possible geotechnical issues on the site.
So our engineers have looked at the analysis that the developer provided. For the overall site, the more troubling geotechnical issues were in the area where the lofts building is. This particular location does not have the same geotechnical issues. Now, having said that, they have addressed the engineering of this particular site. Our city's engineers have reviewed the analysis that they have provided and are finding it sufficient.
Okay. Yeah, the report said that, but I think because it's, it's still, I think, it's still a sore spot for residents.
Yeah.
It's worth reiterating the concern.
If there are no further questions from council, I'm going to ask if the applicant would like to have any rebuttals to what you've heard tonight.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Several things here. Let me start with Mr. Dugan's comments and let you know my conflicting situation here. I'm representing Mr. Mason, who owns CBI for their boundary adjustment project. So I am intimately aware of the entire situation. So I'm treading lightly here. Just to be frank, I don't feel that there is any disagreement or anything else between Medvest, the developer of this property, nor CBI as far as granting some sort of easement or some sort of secondary emergency access to the Rivergate campus as part of all of this. And I tend to agree with Heather that these things will come up when that next project comes through. It's scheduled for Planning Commission this coming Monday. As Mr. Dugan said, it's unfortunate that we can't just kind of see all these things together. Bottom line, one thing I would like to clarify that Mr. Dugan stated was that he was saying 30 feet on each side. I believe what he was trying to say was, and I'm not trying to put words in Mr. Dugan's mouth, but 15 feet on each side for a total of a 30-foot right-of-way. 15 feet came from Rivergate back in 2004, dedicated as a public tract for right-of-way purposes. And I believe Mr. Mason would be comfortable dedicating 15 feet of right-of-way. However, Mr. Mason is being asked for 45 feet of a right-of-way dedication as part of that boundary adjustment application. Beyond that, I'd rather save any further comments for when that next project comes along, and hope I didn't step on anyone's toes with those comments. Anything related to traffic, I think I'd like to defer to the project engineer, Rob Harris, who's here from Groff Engineering. There was, this site has been incredibly difficult, and that's why it's taken so long getting through the process. Over a year now of discussions with city staff and the like. We started with, parking is a crazy bad problem. You need to fix parking. Your project is a non-starter if you don't fix parking. So we started with parking, which then moved into a two-tier parking deck, which then turned into attempting to landscape a parking deck, as well as accommodate the drainage for all this extra parking for this new site. The owners of Lot 2 and Lot 3 are actually separate entities, so this project is trying to fix a lot of the past ills that occur at Rivergate. In my opinion, they've done wonderful things to do that, but this site has a lot of competing interests between drainage, landscaping, density, finances, the list goes on. And so we've tried to really kind of meet every expectation and shove it all and make it all work and squeeze it in, and it's been an extreme challenge. So this is kind of where we've landed. We feel it's a great product. It's been, staff has done a wonderful job kind of consolidating all of the various city department comments and getting us to this point. With that, back to the parking deck and your discussion of solar panels, I think we all agree that that is something we definitely need to be looking at, and it was looked at. The parking deck went from being, was it a structure or was it a surface lot? How do we deal with it if it were which and what? How do we do, should we just, could we put just solar panels over the top of all the parking? And that became cost prohibitive at this point, as well as other issues. We looked at canvas canopies, we looked at, and landed on, with the help of landscape architects, how to do landscaping on top of a surface parking lot that's elevated. So again, we've really tried to work hard to meet all those competing interests. I don't know if I'm missing any other questions, just kind of skimming through my notes from listening to your comments. So I would gladly entertain if there's anything I did not address.
Yeah, I just kind of, the reason I asked Heather about the question about CDOT, who is their study isn't really going to answer the question that Ms. Mazzario brought up of on-site circulation, and is it too crowded, and have we packed too much into this in terms of average daily trips onto the site itself, not worrying about those two intersections that CDOT has control of. But and over the course of the year, I'm sure you've studied that. We know that it's fairly congested down there right now, and how do we mitigate that? That's when I look at site plan, it's just, you drive into the garage and you're there, but it hasn't. There's no significant widening of other streets or anything else to eliminate the constrictions that we see there now. So how is that anticipated to be handled?
I'm not the technical guy. I'm the planner guy. So I will defer that question to Rob Harries, if you don't mind, the project engineer.
A little discussion on that would be helpful. I've been late to a few appointments out there, and I don't want to be later, I guess, is my. So thanks.
Understood.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions while I'm here that I might be able to address? Or? Great, thank you. I'm fully available. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rob.
Good evening. I'm Rob Harris, Goff Engineering, 126 Rock Point Drive. You are correct, Councilor Rookie, that the traffic assessment that we prepared, when the Rivergate PUD project was contemplated, it had to make some estimates, a master plan level. It's going to be this many square foot of medical office building, this much hospital, this much commercial retail, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. The access permit was granted by CDOT for, I don't quite know the exact numbers, but there's 7 lots out there at Rivergate Center. Mm-hmm. 2 of them have been developed pretty much in line with what the master plan anticipated. This lot is being developed pretty much in line with what the master plan anticipated. So their access permit, effectively looks at the average daily trips. There was a traffic study that was prepared as part of the Rivergate Center that looked at signalization at both the north and south sawmill intersections. Long story short, the project was given an access permit from CDOT for this number of average daily trips. Intersection improvements were constructed, a signalized intersection on the north, and then a right out, left in only condition on Sawmill South. So the traffic assessment that we kind of put together basically tabulated, here's what was anticipated, here's what has been built previously, and here's what's being proposed, and here's where we fit in. And we're still, 40% of the average daily trips. That study has been submitted to CDOT, and I have not received any comment from them yet. Regarding the on-site circulation, we haven't done any turning analyses or any sort of looking at how traffic patterns work on site, because all of the roadways on site were, the roadways that were designed and built on site were to accommodate this level of service and this type of traffic. And we keep talking about everybody is going to be, there's a lot more multimodal stuff happening, so maybe that will happen.
Hopefully. No, but, yeah, and to add to your support of the idea coming off of Sawmill directly into that upper level parking garage reduces the amount of traffic impacting the site. So that's makes some sense to me.
Yeah, and we did, yes, in fact, we did look at that. I mean, because we have, right now, there is effectively that surface parking lot that's on lot 3R that is being accessed completely from Rivergate Lane.
Right.
Now, all of that, not all of it, but 90% of that parking will be accessed off of Sawmill Road. There still will be another parking lot down below, but we don't anticipate it to be any worse.
Yeah, it was always going to be something there.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
And I would just articulate a thought that occurred to me. The design of the building is for the inpatient services plus surgery, which are the ones that will generate the daily trips more than the outpatient. The inpatient, I assume, will remain on the west side of, in the existing building. And my assumption is that would generate less traffic, so there will be, I think the logic to me says that there will be a lot more traffic going over along Sawmill to the parking garage, or at the very worst, coming down the lane there, rather than coming down the lane past the lofts.
I think that's a valid assumption. That was not incorporated. I mean, the directional distribution and the actual type of hospital that this facility is compared to the other type of hospital is not really differentiated in the ITE traffic manual that we really use to differentiate traffic trips. But I agree with you.
That's my intuitive reaction, but you haven't, there has been nothing in the analysis that goes in for either toward or away from this idea.
Okay, yeah. I will add just one more thing that was brought up during discussion. I mean, we've been plagued with trying to get this emergency access to work. We have met with the fire department. We've talked, what we really need to get is we need to get a way that the emergency service vehicles can come in between these two buildings and egress without having to make a 3-point turnaround. I mean, that's really where this emergency access criteria is coming from. We have explored a variety of options, and just most recently, recognizing that there may be some delays that could occur with how this emergency access gets played out, we were able to come up with a solution as a temporary emergency access that would happen on this particular property, that would happen south of the parking garage, north of the city's parcel B. Right now, that area is planned for very dense landscaping. However, I just wanted to bring it up that we have explored just about everything that we can, and we have been told that that temporary access would never be supported in the long term, and we recognize that. But if there's anything that we can do to satisfy the fire department's requirement for an emergency access, even in a temporary condition, while the rest of this area starts developing, we would be very interested in exploring those options.
But I think one of the things I'll be looking for from staff, and understanding it won't come back unless we ask it to come back to city council, is what's the reality of that becoming a 60-foot public right-of-way on the south side that would ease a lot of these, be mutually supportive of both properties, it would seem, so that emergency access becomes ultimately a full-on access.
This is the first time that I had heard about this, but there is a utility corridor that runs, there's a sewer and water, and I do not know that if what you're asking is an additional 15-foot coming from lot 3R and then 30 feet coming from the CVI property, is that what you're?
I think that's what was referred to earlier, yes. Not me, but yeah.
We would lose a significant amount of landscaping, and I'm not positive that roadway would align with the utility corridor that presently exists.
The plot thickens.
Yeah, that's probably one of the things we haven't looked at yet, but we've looked at a lot.
Okay.
I guess what's more important, emergency access or landscaping? So,
yeah.
what's more
Not
important?
our choice tonight, thank you.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment and an observation. When you have good planning, these things fall into place, and we have to clean up things that we inherit when we annex properties that were developed in the county.
Well, I guess I have some comments about the landscaping.
Do you have any questions,
Well,
engineering related? That would be Mayor.
It's the landscaping on that parking garage. I mean, I guess I don't get out much, but I wondered how that was really going to work in reality, because I go to enough parking garages out of the city, and I've never seen trees. Maybe you have? Have you seen trees on a parking garage?
Would have to comply with our parking, or our landscape requirement for parking.
That
Certain
seems-
distance from any parking space, you have to have a tree. So whether that's on a 15th floor of a parking deck, or if it's in front of Walmart, you gotta have trees.
Well, I understand trees in front of Walmart, I get it, but trees on top of a parking garage? Really?
So I'm Mary Bates. I'm with DHM Design. We're at 1309 East 3rd Avenue. We're the landscape architects. And we have explored a lot of different things with this. This has been a requirement that's been requested of us by city staff to include these trees. Again, we explored a lot of different options, from shade canopies to canopies with solar panels to green roof. So that's essentially, the city staff has decided that the trees are important in how we break up this parking lot so it doesn't look like a big expanse of asphalt, and also provide the heat, cooling, or heat island effect. So they are essentially designed, these planters are designed as a green roof system. So green roofs are built all over the country. They are effective. The biggest concerns usually are structural, which we have sort of addressed in our design. So the weight of the growing medium and the trees is built into these planters, are structurally integral to the parking deck, and all of that has been addressed at this level. And so yeah, that's how we've gone about it.
Okay, my eyes are this big, and I guess I really can't wait to see those trees, because to me it seems unnecessary.
Sweetie, you need to get out more.
You're right, I need to get out more.
No, I respect that. And that is, that would be expected to via the code that's been in place for a long time. And so this is the fact that the first time we've encountered a parking garage with the same landscape requirements.
Yeah, I think that was a question I was about to ask. Would this be actually the first two-level parking garage in the entire city of Durango?
That's uncovered.
That's uncovered.
That's uncovered, okay. Oh, I see.
So this particular requirement would not have come into place if the parking deck had been enclosed within a structure.
Okay.
But as it is, that upper level is essentially surface parking. It's open.
Invisible from Sawmill as well as the state highway.
Yes.
So-
And we were discussing with their team a variety of alternatives. Where they came around to was deciding to move forward with the planters. And again, this was going through not just extensive discussions with planners, but with city landscape architects as well, who have better expertise in that area than I do.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other comments? The applicant has had a chance to have a rebuttal. I'm going to close a public hearing and look for a decision by the council.
I would make a motion to approve the final development plans for Lot 3 and the Rivergate plan development, subject to the conditions in the report.
I think probably you should say the conditions in the agenda document.
In the agenda document.
Yep. Since they're all spelled out.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor Patine?
Yes.
Counselor Brookie?
Yes.
Counselor Youssef? I'm sorry.
Recuse.
And Mayor Marbury?
Yes. And I have to apologize to 8.1.2 and also to the Crater property. I was so excited about the Durango Mesa plan, I just jumped. And so I made a mistake and I apologize, and so we're going to go. Thank you for my team player over here bringing me back to a public hearing to consider amending and repealing certain sections of Article 7 of Chapter 21 of the City Durango Code regarding smoking in public places.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll take this one. During the fire, the City Council adopted an emergency ordinance which authorized the city manager to impose certain fire restrictions, including restrictions on smoking, and that was done, as you recall, and that emergency ordinance has recently expired, which caused staff and council to, I'm sorry, I'll wait for...
Thank
yes,
you.
Come back. Cause staff to consider whether the smoking restrictions should effectively be made permanent. So at this point, that's exactly what's being considered. I actually, looks like I did not bring the piece of paper that I have in and then my computer's in the shop. So there's a list that's in the agenda document.
Yes.
Actually,
About
this,
places.
I could read that.
if you don't mind, I apologize. I thought it was in my file, but I see that it's not.
The proposed code amendments would prohibit smoking in or on all of the following city-owned, operated, or managed properties: bus stops or waiting areas, all parks, playgrounds, and picnic areas, all recreational facilities and ball fields, excepting Hillcrest Golf Course, Animas River Trail and adjacent greenway along the trail, including the Animas River access, all Animas River access points, all open space, parking areas, and trails within city-owned open space or natural lands, all reservoirs, including the area within the Lake Nighthorse Recreation Area, all city-owned buildings and all parking lots, grounds, and landscape areas around those buildings, including sidewalks that are outside the public street rights of way, and all city-owned parking lots, including the transit center.
That sounds like a thorough list. And I think to actually sort of paraphrase that, that would include all city-owned buildings, like this building in the parking lot, the library, the grounds around the library, parking lot at the library, those sorts of places. Likewise, all of the open space that was subject to smoking restrictions during the fire. So I think the question really is, having read that list, is that it would not impact sidewalks adjacent to rights of way. So what I meant by that was, for instance, at this building, there's a sidewalk on the north side that's adjacent to the right of way. That sidewalk would still be a place where people could smoke as long as they weren't within 15 feet of a doorway. But the parking lot behind City Hall and the parking lot to the south would be part of the
No smoking.
restricted area. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, at the library, the sidewalk on the very west side of the library along that street would be a legal place to smoke, but you step off the sidewalk into the parking lot of the library, that would be a restricted area. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to open the public testimony. I don't know if there was anyone that signed up for this. City manager's going to check it out. Anyone signed up, city manager, for the smoking ordinance?
No, ma'am.
All right, then I'm going to close public testimony and have questions by council or comments.
Couple questions.
Okay.
Why are we excluding Hillcrest Golf Course?
That's actually excluded in the current ordinance. So some of those places actually are excluded in the current ordinance. Certain parks are currently excluded. So I included that in the list. I excluded it because it's historically been excluded.
So do
that's up to council.
golfers smoke?
Some.
Some?
Cigar, oh, right. But, okay. And then,
Small ones.
The proposal was to exclude, because it's historically been excluded, that's the reason.
okay. River put-ins.
River put-ins will be the places along the river where people actually sort of access the river. So those will be areas like along, there's a
29.
variety of places along the river.
Right, I mean, with that.
Those are included in the
So
list.
like when, okay, like the new, where Oxford Park, all those, they will, okay.
Right, those will all be included.
They will all be included.
They will all be included in the restriction, yes.
All of Lake Nighthorse.
All of
All
like
of Lake
Night Horse.
Is smoking defined in the current?
It is.
And is it differentiated between other types of inhaling activities?
Smoking and what we commonly call vaping is included.
It's included, so what we're talking about here would include vaporizers or whatever it is.
Anything that involves a lot, I think the way vaping, there's a code section now that defines smoking. And I was just gonna leave that alone because it talks about what currently is smoking, and it kind of follows the same restriction as in the Clean Indoor Air Act that talks about what is smoking. But in common parlance, it would include smoking, the typical kind of lit tobacco or other product, and it would include vaping as well.
Just say no.
Yeah, I mean.
And that's the current definition.
No, I know, it's just kind of, it is kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know that there's, the intent of the direction when we talked about this was really to have a fire safe issue, right?
The original idea was fire safe.
Yeah.
May have morphed a bit, but that's.
I don't know that I'm gonna sit up here and try to differentiate this, but I thought I'd bring it up just in case.
And nor
that's a
did I want to
concern to any of
reinvent the
us.
wheel in defining what's smoking and not smoking, so we're going to go with the
How is
current
vape
You'd
definition.
like me not to go down that slippery slope, I would imagine.
Right.
No.
Could you tell me how a vape is lit?
It's not. So, yeah, to the best of my knowledge, which is limited at best, it's internal componentry, it's electronic.
Right.
But there is a heating, as I understand it, there's
Heating
a heating
element.
element in them, yeah.
It's all
So
internal.
the actual releasing of the chemicals, of whatever you're inhaling, is activated by a heat source inside the, whatever you call those devices, the vape device.
Right.
And that's the way that the current definition is worded, is that there's an electronic, now I suppose they could someday invent a method of doing that doesn't involve any kind of heat, but that's the current definition. So again, I didn't want to go there. And this, assuming council wants to move forward with this, we'll bring back an ordinance, of course, that will also talk about, it'll include the language that was just read tonight and include language about what's defined as smoking. But the emergency ordinance and the emergency regulations that the city manager imposed included the current definition in the code of smoking, and we just kept that moving forward into this one.
And this is the public hearing.
This is the public
And we have
hearing.
not received any emails or anything else, to the best of my knowledge.
I haven't heard anything.
Any interested parties, so.
Mr. Bettine, I think during the fire, we received more calls regarding smoking, and it was not necessarily related to the fire. It was the citizen calling to complain how offensive the smoke was, in addition to being, potentially a fire hazard. But those were mostly reported within the city limits. And we had to explain to the citizen about the Colorado Clean Indoor Air Act. Some of those were on trails and trailheads.
I had a question about the parking lot at Santa Rita. Where is an all city-owned parking lot, so that parking lot at Santa Rita would also be, you can't do this and flick it, okay?
That's right.
I guess one of my comments would be that I would like to see the signs at the playground areas. I pick up a lot of cigarette butts at Brookside Park. That's what I spend my time doing when I have my grandkids there, and the sign is somewhere else. So I would like personally, as a person that goes to those children's playgrounds, maybe you guys don't, but I do, that right there where those kids are, that there's a nice sign that says, don't smoke at this playground. That's my comment.
This ordinance doesn't specifically talk about signage.
I know,
We
but
could
I'm
add
still gonna
that,
say it. I can put it in as a condition.
Sure, no, we could, and I think it depends on where you are in terms of how that gets signed, but
Well, you have to tell somebody they can't smoke. You have to have some kind of signs.
Well, we take the position that, implied knowledge of the rules, so we don't have to post signs about everything that's illegal. But I understand, and so if council wants to impose some specific signage requirements, I guess I thought we would the implication would be it would be left to Kathy Metz and her staff to post signs in the rec.
How is somebody from out of town going to know that they are not supposed to smoke at the parking lot at the transit center unless there's some words there?
I think your point's good, but I think this is a policy. This is not
A detail?
yeah.
The
this
devil's in the detail.
Right. But I think that's, when we create a new policy and a new law, then a new ordinance, then, the methodology to enforce it has to be A, budgeted, and B, passed on to the police department to figure out how to best enforce it and inform the public.
Mayor Marbury, if I may, I think the intent here is to educate people, and we do post rules for signs. And one of the things we hope happens with this ordinance is that other citizens will remind people not to smoke. And I think your intention is good. However, if the defense, if that individual says, well, there's no sign if you put a condition here, it has to be within 15 feet of a playground, and the sign has disappeared because it's now in a dorm room up at Fort Lewis, that person would not.
Well, how do you give any cover to the person like me who's going to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't know that, but there's no smoking."
Well, there's no drinking in parks or parking lots.
Yes, that's
And
true.
we don't post that. There's some rules that it's called civics, and we need to be teaching that a little more effectively.
Well, I agree, and the man that cussed me out at Brookside Park,
Then you call 911, and we have an officer there to make that happen.
I wish I had my grandkids with me, and I didn't. But yes, it's one of those situations that even with the sign, I got cussed out. So that's my suggestion. Okay, well, let's go ahead.
It's probably redundant. Smoking marijuana in public is illegal in general.
Yes.
And should that ever, I guess that's in our own code anyway, right?
It's in state law as well.
And state law. So it really would be redundant to reiterate here.
I thought it was redundant, and we were just limiting this to smoking of substances that are otherwise legal.
Right, okay.
Are we ready to go forward? The public hearing is closed, so I'm looking for a decision from City Council.
I'll make a motion to direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance for first reading. Is this what we're, okay, at the
Yes.
next regularly scheduled city council meeting to amend and repeal certain sections of Article 7, Chapter 21 of the City of Durango Code concerning smoking in public areas.
Is there a second?
Second.
A roll call, please.
Councilor Bricky?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef?
Yes.
Councilor Patine?
Yes.
Councilor White?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes, and I am apologizing all over the place about the Crater property. I will buy you a cup of coffee. I apologize, I am so sorry. But this is now, we are here, a public hearing to consider the Crater Lot 3RPD1 minor subdivision.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Scott Shine, I'm the planning manager for the Community Development Department. We tried to set up the agenda where you could lead off with a softball and then move into the more complex ones, but you jumped right into the complex project.
I was so excited.
This is a relatively straightforward minor subdivision out in the Crater area, also referred to as Grandview, South Fork, Three Springs Crossings. There's a lot of different sort of ways to refer to this area. I'll just give you a little summary and a little background on recent activity out there, and then the applicants are here and can answer any questions that you might have. So there's an existing 28.7 acre lot, and GRVP LLC is proposing 3 new lots, one that will contain some recently constructed drainage features and will be managed by the Metro District out there as a commonly managed open space feature.
and then 2 lots for future commercial or mixed-use development. So just to get us all oriented, this is the lot we're looking at. It's changed recently, and I'll go over that, but just south of Wilson Gulch Road and sort of southwest of the hospital. This shows the zoning. The entire area there is zoned plan development. PD is that purple color. And just a few years ago, there was a character district plan adopted for the South Fork area, and that serves as the conceptual development plan for the area. That's what's shown here on this map. And you can see directly south of where that traffic signal light is. That's the large-scale retail parcel. That's what we're looking at tonight. And then the green parcel contains the recently constructed Smart 160 trail, is shown there as open space. That was previously subdivided. This is what the lot looked like before that happened. We recently completed this subdivision to create the city trail parcel that's shown there in red. That contains the trail, as I said, along with some drainage features for the trail. And then now looking at what's labeled there as Lot 3R PD1, GRVP wants to split that, like I said, into 3 lots. They were required to construct some drainage improvements. They're going to parcel that out, and that'll stay maintained and owned by the Metro District. And then these 2 lots, one very small lot, which I believe is intended for sort of a drive-through, small kiosk type of facility, and then the larger lot is 3R PD-1A. So like I said, a relatively straightforward split, just sort of setting the stage for future commercial development, cleaning up where those commonly owned and maintained features will be versus the private development that will happen. I think we're all hoping in the near future. So subdivisions have a set of 6 criteria in the Land Use and Development Code. We reviewed the proposal based on those criteria. We gave the applicants 1 round of comments on the plat. They've addressed those, and we feel like all these criteria have been met. And we presented this to Planning Commission at their meeting on July 30th, and they unanimously recommended approval. There was a slight revision to one of the conditions in the staff report that I handed out at that meeting, so it's in the record, but it just cleared up the requirement to build East Owen Drive from the Rancho Vedado development into Wilson Gulch. That will be a requirement upon future development of this lot. If the VOA lot, the 3 acres that's on the other side of East Owen Road, happens before this lot develops, the owners of the lot have agreed to cost share to get that road connection done. So there was just a revision related to the language in that condition. It's pretty straightforward. So with all that background, we're recommending approval with those conditions, and Planning Commission has also recommended approval.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to say anything?
Good evening. John Penny, 65 Mercado Street, Suite 250, Durango. GRVP, the applicant. With me tonight, Gary Whalen, Vice President of Sales and Marketing, and Kurt Prinsloo, Planning Manager. Those 2 attended the Planning Commission meeting last month, and I didn't, so kind of by default, they're making me do this tonight. So Scott did a great job explaining everything. It's pretty straightforward. Between his presentation and Kurt's narrative that is included in your packet, I think it pretty much covers everything. I might touch on a couple things just to, I can get an aerial. Yeah, there. Yeah, let's see there. So yeah, this is the lot, like Scott said, we're subdividing this into those 3 lots. The main purpose is to dedicate the pocket park to the Metro District number 4. We created these 2 ponds In 2016 was the first phase, and we completed them last year in 2017. And along with this ditch at the south end. So basically, these facilities will serve the drainage for this whole property when it's developed. Again, it will be owned and maintained by the Metro District, and that pocket park is around 7.5, I think it's 7.5 acres, around 7 acres. So that's the main purpose of this. Other than that, we've got, we split it into those 2 other lots, and we're getting some activity on it.
Okay.
We do have a confidentiality agreement signed, so I can't talk about a whole lot, so.
Well, thank you very much.
Could I ask the kind of purpose you're thinking of for that 0.1 acre lot?
Oh, yeah. I guess they asked that other planning commission too. Did you happen to include that other aerial? You did, that's fine. Yeah, if you look at, so the way we had been proposing this, the pocket park, and the property line between the pocket park and the remaining lot was a north-south line that went straight up, basically along this old High Llama Lane road. When we overlaid it on this aerial, we actually saw this area right here. We're like, that could be, some usable space that we could actually sell. And so,
Okay, so it was just simply of saying, okay,
yeah, there's more.
It's a little flat piece that's big enough to be useful for some purpose.
Right. Yeah, and it's on the west side. It wasn't, and so yeah, it was just kind of something we wanted to put in there.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open the public testimony, and there was no one here. I'm closing the public testimony. Questions and comments from council?
I just, back to that connection 200 feet to Rancho Vedado there, that was originally within that boundary, and now now is a dedicated easement? And as a result of this action, or it was always there?
Previous.
Okay. Yeah, that's just, I've come to know that that's going to be a critical juncture for not for you folks, but for Rancho Vedado too, to reduce the traffic impact directly onto the highway, which is, as that other subdivision builds out, becoming a huge safety problem. So, to the extent that those folks might, I'm not suggesting they participate, but if nothing happens there for a longer period of time, they perhaps could be coerced into. It's not a very big section of road, but if the easement is there, the right of way is dedicated, then that opens that possibility. But look forward to what comes forward from your property in the future very soon. That's great.
We'll keep you posted.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I'm going to ask for a decision by the city council. Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the request from GRVP LLC for a minor subdivision to Crater Lot 3RPD-1, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report and discussed at the Planning Commission hearing of July 30th, 2018.
A second?
Roll call, please.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Councilor Bateen?
Yes.
Councilor Bookie?
Yes.
Councilor White?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes. Moving to a public hearing for the annexation and initial zoning conceptual plan development review and subdivision of the Sunier addition.
Mayor, I have to recuse myself from this one.
Yes, sir. And staff report, please.
So I was last anyway. I don't even get a cup of coffee.
I'll buy you a cup of coffee.
Okay, so a lot of words for what's a fairly decent-sized project, but not a huge project. The parcel that we're talking about is this 1 acre piece of land. It's off of 32nd Street. Right here, this is Sunshine Gardens. This is TL Roofing. And actually, during this process, about a four-tenth of an acre piece of TL Roofing will be subdivided onto this property, and that's where the access for the development will be. What they're talking about doing or proposing to do is 12 duplex units, so 6 duplexes with 2 units apiece. the county, the land right now is in the unincorporated county, so it has to be annexed into the city. We'll have an initial zoning of planned development, or PD. We'll do the subdivision, working with the county to get a sliver of this land onto this property. And some of the background on the property: the lot is undeveloped. There is fill dirt on the site. That's important because the way the code reads, it restricts height when you're building to the natural grade. So, for instance, if you've got 10 feet of fill, then anything that you could build would be 10 feet closer to that, the three-dimensional cap. So, in the next stage of review, the applicants will see how exactly deep that fill is, and whether some of it or all of it or just a portion of it needs to be removed. The height for duplexes in the LUDC is 30 feet. So if the fill is 10 feet, those buildings can only be 20 feet. So some of it will probably end up being removed. There are some lots to the north that are undeveloped. These are really big lots. They have conservation easements on them. These conservation easements restrict development on each one of these lots to one house each. So it's a total of 5. There are 2 more lots off to the east. But these are really big lots. Not much is anticipated to happen there except for those 5 lots. And the street that's being built can provide access to them in the future. So therefore, this street will be developed, even though it's a private access. Let me go down to where it is. Even though this is a private access, we're going to develop it to city standards in case we ever do need to use it for access to these lots. This is north on this picture, because you can't have access up on a private street to other people's properties, this many properties. So the street will have a sidewalk, it'll have tree lawns, on-street parking, and 2 travel lanes. The future land use for the area is multifamily, or medium density residential, and this project complies with that. Medium density allows up to about 12 units per acre. This would be less than that, so 12 units on 1.4 acres of land. And it fits with the existing development pattern. Sunshine Gardens has a lot of duplex units, as you can see, and fourplexes. To the south of 32nd, these are all duplexes that have been there for a number of years. This is, I believe it's Spring Tree Apartments, and then more townhomes over here. So it complies with all of that. We're in the first stage, annexation and initial zoning. And this is also a planned development, which is a 3-step process. We're in the conceptual stage right now. At the conceptual stage, we really determine how many units can go on the site. Is the project feasible? Are there any giant red flags that would prevent this from happening? Staff hasn't found any. At the next stage, the preliminary stage, there are more detailed engineering plans will be created. We'll look into maybe some design guidelines. We like to do PDs because it allows flexibility in the project design, but in exchange, sometimes we ask for a little bit more in terms of the design of the units. Also, because there'll be more than 4 units that are for sale, this property is subject to fair share. So later in the project, when we have more details on exactly how big, as in number of bedrooms, each one of these duplexes will have, we can draft a fair share proposal and then eventually a fair share agreement. So as I said, here's the road going to the north. This is the property. They'll have to do on-site detention and water quality because the area of the lot, it will be more than an acre. That's something that'll be done at the preliminary stage, and they'll work with our engineering staff to get that done. This is a conceptual layout, 6 lots, and so what we have is a hammerhead turnaround, and the reason for that is the city standards call for cul-de-sacs when you do public streets, and our city operations department really likes cul-de-sacs or a through street in order to have efficient snow removal. But we're starting to do more and more of these infill developments, and when you have a city standard cul-de-sac, it eats up a lot of the property. So for reference, this cul-de-sac is about 65 or 66 feet from curb to curb. The city standard is 105 feet. So if you can imagine that the road and the cul-de-sac itself would take up approximately a third of the property, which means there's less of the property to build on and to use to make the project profitable. So we did do a hammerhead with Jameson last year, as you might remember. We've got some other infill projects coming up. So we're trying to balance some competing priorities in terms of what works for city operations, what works for fire department. Hammerheads work for the fire department. What works for planning in terms of getting units built. And as a private street, this means that the HOA will have to maintain maintenance of the street in the future. Is something burning?
I smell the same thing.
Yeah.
Does smell like.
Nobody's making popcorn, City Hall.
Well, actually.
Okay, we need somebody to go check it out. All right, we all smell the same thing.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
At the very first negotiations that staff had with the applicant, they plan to do fewer housing units and more vacation rentals. We like housing units, maybe not so much vacation rentals, but in exchange for the applicant providing, instead of 6 or 7 units, providing 12 units, we did agree to say, okay, you should be able to have a vacation rental, because I think that was a fair compromise. These are the conditions of approval. I won't read through them.
How many vacation rentals? Oh, no more than
one. Yeah, one vacation
One out
rental.
of 12.
And I don't know if you read the planning commission minutes, there was a typo or an error. There are not 5 houses on each lot. To the north, it's 5 total houses, so 1 house on each lot. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, we're okay, we're safe. Thank you.
And so we'll have a positive fiscal impact. We'll collect infrastructure and transportation fees, as well as fair share fees. The project complies with the comprehensive plan goals, and it's a recommendation of the Planning Commission, which approved this project 5-0, that City Council approve the project and the applicant prepares a preliminary plan.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to say anything?
Good evening. I'm Jeff Pillis with Set Engineering, 1309 East 3rd Avenue. I'm more or less here to answer any questions. If you have any technical questions, I realize this is early in the process, but we did put a lot of thought into this and work closely with city staff, and I think we've done everything we've been asked to do, so let me know if you have any questions.
Well, thank you very much.
I did have one question.
Go ahead.
And I thought I understood from some of the documentation that you are actually intending to have a fair share unit or two rather than fee in lieu. If so, I commend you.
You want to answer that?
You said you saw some documentation that there would be potentially a fair share unit instead of a fair share fee?
And that's what I thought I saw it. That we had, this was a 200-page agenda doc today. So
I'm not aware of anything like that.
Okay, it's unusual. If so, it's unusual. And one of the issues that we have had with fair share is that the fee in lieu is probably not commensurate with what we're trying to do by encouraging more affordable housing units. And if you can find your way towards meeting the fair share requirement with an actual unit, that would be a real plus.
I'm writing that down. I'll take it back to the applicant and we'll discuss it for sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got one
ahead.
question, which is maybe for Mark as well. But the idea of a private road coming off of 32nd Street, which at that point of intersection, is that a county road or a city street? City at that point, yeah. Okay. But so we're providing access via a private drive to a county property.
You mean the 5 lots?
Yeah, 5 lots beyond, yeah. that's just a unique situation. We haven't had that before, I don't think.
So those-
Maybe Mark can point out in that.
Yeah, those lots also have access from the west. From,
So it's not,
for Bend
maybe not the
Street.
primary access, it's.
Right, it's River Bend.
It just makes circulation and emergency service better and all that
Yeah,
kind of
and
thing.
if those lots do develop, then having access from 2 points, so obviously would be better than having it from one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to move on, and I don't see any public testimony. So I'm going to close the public testimony and questions and comments from council. Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a decision by council. I'm looking for a motion.
So I'll make a motion to,
Approve Sunier addition.
yeah.
You have it?
Okay.
I've got the language if.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I'll move to approve the Sunier addition, annexation and initial zoning, conceptual plan, development plan, and subdivision, and direct the applicant to submit the preliminary plan development plan for review.
I'll second that.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Yes.
Councilor White,
Yes.
Councilor Bricky,
Yes.
Mayor Marbury.
Yes. Would someone go get City Councilor Bettine? I think he's back there.
Burning popcorn?
Well, we need him. Now we need him. Moving on, we are at an ordinance, and this is an ordinance approving the annexation and initial zoning for the Basin Co-op addition to the city of Durango and declaring an effective date.
Yes, as councilman recall, you reviewed petitions for annexation from
Yes.
Basin Co-op some time ago. It's taken this long to get the documents together in terms of plats and so forth. But they are now complete, including there were some details regarding, I should wait for Councilor Bettine to finish this, but
Okay.
to follow up, this is just the ordinance that flowed from the prior action. It's now ready for adoption by council.
Thank you.
So
very-
this is ordinance O 2018-20.
I'll look for a motion from council.
Motion we approve, we approve ordinance 2018-20.
Second,
Second.
roll call, please.
Councilor Youssef,
Yes.
Councilor White,
Yes.
Councilor Bricky,
Yes.
Councilor Bettine,
Yes.
Mayor Marbury.
Yes. Discussion and possible action concerning a resolution submitting to the registered electors of the city at a special election to be held on November 6, 2018, a ballot issue and title concerning an increase in city taxes. Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Tonight's discussion and possible action reflect a very long process of over a year of extensive community outreach and community engagement. And I think it might be good to take a minute, since this is a very important action. I'd like to ask Ms. Blake to come up and just, so the public viewing this will have the benefit of a summary of how we got to this point with all of our inputs. The actual question that is before you tonight was discussed at the previous study session, and all the council participated, 4 of you in person, 1 telephonically, and it represents a compromise and a balance, and I think the council should be commended for listening to a community that has different opinions on this, and they will be telling you what their opinion is as we get, if you pass this, if we go to an election. But it's always good to try to find middle ground, and I think this reflects that. So let's have Amber go over a few PowerPoint slides for the benefit of the public and as a refresher.
Great. So I want to thank you all. We've had a lot of meetings over the last year on this topic. And after the public process, that included more than 50 public meetings, 4 community forums, as well as individual conversations, gathering input via email submissions. We received over 5,000 comments from the public, all which were tabulated and they're on our website. And then we also had 3 community surveys as well as the statistically valid survey. So I want to thank our community for participating, and I want to thank all of you for your efforts behind supporting this process so we know what our community really would like to see. And what we heard was, we'll get to the slide in a second, maintain what we have. And we heard Councilor Marbury earlier reiterating this, but we need to maintain what we have. We have done a lot of great work to improve our streets to the point that they are today, and as Levi Lloyd, our city operations director, showed us with the PCI index this afternoon, we made some strides. But if we don't maintain that, then we could slide quickly back into that poor category for our roadways. So in addition to maintaining what we have, the public also asked us to look at increasing fees and fines and examine if there are more efficient ways or effective ways to spend our existing revenues. The final thing they asked us to do was to look at the possibility of cutting things. So if there were programs or services that weren't effective or benefiting our community, then why are we spending money on them? So right now, department heads are looking at all of their programs, and during the budget process, as we move forward with that, you will see any cuts or ways to improve how we're spending the money to be more efficient, and then really, how do we move forward maintaining what we have when we have a need for an additional $8 million a year for really mostly capital projects, as well as some operating pieces for public safety and code enforcement. So the engagement process identified 4 key priorities for maintaining what we have: streets, public safety, maintaining parks, and sidewalks. We currently have a dedicated sales tax, the 2015 half-cent, that calls out the dedicated sales tax, calls out the cost of construction, operations, or maintenance, or recreation facilities, parks, trails, pedestrians, and bicycle improvements. So we do see in the ballot question here that operations and maintenance is called out. So that was what the voters voted on in 2015. And in the past, as you all know, during the budget process, council has chosen at the recommendation of with the recommendation of the advisory board to use that 2015 half-cent money primarily for capital projects. And the Parks and Recreation Department has done a great job. The Multimodal Department has received some funds since 2015 for a few projects as well, and are moving forward with implementing those master plans. So if we move back to the priorities here, that if the policy direction is there, could be used for maintaining parks. This new money that would be from this ballot measure, if you decide to move forward with it, would be for the streets, public safety, and sidewalks, as well as the other items that are more clearly defined in the ballot language. What was decided on at the study session, which is in the current ballot language in the resolution that is up for adoption this evening, is a 5.4 increase in the mill levy. So 5.4 mill increase. I'd like to make sure to take this opportunity to explain what the increase would look like for a house, a property owner, residential property owner in this case. So, Ms. Marbury, Madam Mayor, I have used your house as
Volunteered.
the example, so thank you for volunteering.
Okay.
So if you go, I would like to explain how to do this so a property owner can go to the website and figure out exactly what it means to them. If you go on the county assessor's website and you look up your property, you will see up in the right-hand corner of the screen on the assessor's site what is in this red circle here. So your actual value of your house, according to the assessor, is $395,590. When you take your actual value and multiply it by the assessment ratio, which in 2018 is 7.2%, the assessed value of your home is $28,480. When you take then you take that assessed value, the $28,480, and you multiply it by the mill levy increase. And that will give you the additional amount of property tax that you will pay on your property per year this passes. So So that's $153 additional property tax on your home. If you'd like to know what that is on a monthly basis, it's $12.75 additional property tax per month. Now, we know we all don't think about just what goes to the city on this increase, so we're going to look at the lower box over here, and you can see that in taxes in 2018, you pay $1,011.52. When you add the $153 to that, you get $1,164.52, and that's what, based on this formula, you would pay in 2019 should this pass in property tax. So that's the property tax side, that's the mill levy. The other side of this ballot referendum here that will be going to the voters should you approve it is a 0.55% sales tax. So a little more than half a penny. And that will generate combined approximately $7.5 million for the general fund that can be used on the following items. Or you're gonna read this, aren't you? Or would you like me to read the?
Go ahead and read it.
Okay. So it says, it'll be question 2A, and it says authorization to increase city taxes for 25 years for the purpose of funding police, public safety, and code enforcement, the construction, operation, and maintenance of a police station and other city buildings and street improvements. The question is, shall the city of Durango taxes be increased by not more than $8,716,000 in tax collection in the year 2019, and by whatever amounts are generated annually thereafter, by a mill levy of not more than 5.4 mills, and an additional sales and use tax of not more than 0.55%, for the purposes of funding police, public safety, and code enforcement, the construction, operation, and maintenance of a police station and other city buildings and facilities, and the construction and maintenance of streets, alleys, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and related street improvements, provided that these increased taxes shall not be collected after December 31st, 2043.
Thank you very much for that presentation. So that's my house up there, that's what I pay. And for $13 a month, I can support a new police station, which I do for those guys in the back that have no room to sit at the current police station. And I know what I'm getting with this ballot language. I'm going to be looking at maintenance of streets, alleys, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, street improvements, code enforcement, and we listen to the public, and we're honest. Yes, sir.
Madam Mayor, if I could just summarize what you're about to consider. At the last study session, the council was dealing with how do we solve a problem? And that is a structural problem where the revenues coming to the city will not support the services we currently provide. And we're forecasting that those two lines will cross in the fiscal year 2020. We presented the council with, as Amber indicated, a series of discussions, and we took you through those discussions systematically. So you know, if you increase fees, here's how much you would get. It's like $198,000. Some of those fees may not be politically feasible. You may find out later that as we do the budget, that's something you don't want to do. Which brings me to the main point here. There's discussions underway about how the budget will be balanced. You don't have a budget. I'm working on it, and you'll get it on the 25th of September. As per schedule, we published probably in February. So, as always, we give you our best recommendation as staff, and you review that to decide whether that meets your expectations and serves your constituents. But we have to come up with 8 to 10 million. And at that study session, we started with the lower number, the 8 million. And as Amber indicated, we subtracted from that the amount we could raise in fees and what we could cut. I don't know what we can cut because I've only been through one department budget, and that was today. I take all the information in before making a decision and before recommending it to you. So we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves with what is possibly going to be cut, which segues into what you're going to ask me to do later. The sales tax is still uncertain. So, I was going to report about the July sales tax report, which reflects June sales. We were down 5.6%. And year-to-date sales tax is up 2.1%. So thankfully, we went into June with a little cushion. June 1 was day one of the 416 fire. The train was closed for 41 days. And if we learned anything from Missionary Ridge, there were 4 months after Missionary Ridge that hurt our sales tax economy. And the second month was worse than the first. So we won't have the result of July sales until about the 10th of September. And I need to give you the budget on the 25th of September. So it's not a lot of time to make changes if we have to move quickly. So I want to make sure the council understands we'll keep all the options open, and we'll try to give you some choices that are workable. The difference with this budget compared to the 2009 budget is in 2009, we were one organization that was affected by a worldwide economic collapse. The economy in the United States was collapsing, and we suffered from that. We didn't know what the bottom would be when we were doing the budget, so we had to project what amount of revenue can we depend on, and then we made cuts to expenses to balance that structural deficit. This is different. In this budget and this ballot measure means the difference between investing in our future to maintain what we have, or letting those lines cross and continue to deplete resources. And resources are more than the money in the bank. It's the amount of capital that we've invested that's in the ground. We don't want to be wearing out the streets faster than we can replace them. We don't want to be wearing out the sidewalks faster than we can replace them. The survey indicated that 3 out of 4 people are satisfied and appreciate the services we provide. Now, I interpret that to mean if we're not providing those services at this level, they won't be satisfied. Now, I may be wrong in that interpretation, but if you want to give future generations the same level of investment that you inherited, and actually this council came in with a infrastructure they had to upgrade. So we fixed the water and sewer, and to some degree the solid waste enterprises. So you have a proven track record of fixing things. The last item for you to address is this general fund. And we're not alone. And the infrastructure at the state level, the county level, and the local level is failing. We are using more of that investment than we are replacing. In the current budget, 2018 budget, we had 1 street project. So going back to Levi's presentation, we can't continue to do that. And that 1 street project, I think, is 2 blocks. With all those lane miles, if we don't set aside sufficient revenue and address those street needs in sidewalks, curb and gutter, and so forth at the optimal time, if you have a marginal dollar, if you have $1 to spend, it's better to do crack sealing with that dollar and do multiple lane miles than it is for us to let that street fail. In 1993, I believe, there was a vote to improve Florida Road, and that failed. And then about 10 years ago, we put that back on the ballot. But during that time, if you can remember driving on Florida Road, about 2008, 2009, it was like driving through a war zone with those potholes. That is not an acceptable way of maintaining our infrastructure. So I think the council has done everything possible to collect information and also to present information and ask for input. If we've missed something, we still have time to reach out to the community to get more input. So that we're solving an equation of 7.5 million. So the question here that you're going to be asked is, why does the amount say 8.7 million? And that has to do with Tabor. If we think ahead, let's say we heard a Crater presentation today. Let's say they announce tomorrow these big retailers, and they come online in the first year of this tax, and we collect more money than the 7.5. We'd have to issue refund checks. And those refund checks may be $5, and it may cost us $6 to issue the check. That is one of the, I don't know what word I want to use. It's how Tabor is so perverse to and damaging. Tabor is a taxpayer bill of rights, and when Colorado adopted that in 1992, it is and remains still the most onerous tax control of any state. No state since has adopted anything like Tabor. Several have had it on the ballot. So I'm getting off the point here. We're just Durango. That's why this language has such a negative tone to it. It's because of Tabor. Tabor prescribes how we write it.
So that extra money is for the Tabor Reserve?
Well, what it is, we set the amount to be higher, so that if you set it lower and we get more than that, we have to give it back.
Okay, I understand.
So we were looking for 8 to 10 million, and we got that number down to 7.5 by, we're either going to have to make cuts or implement fees to get to that 7.5.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you, City Manager. Comments from council?
I have,
Go ahead, Dean. No. Yeah, what the city manager just described in that 7.5 versus 8.7 is kind of an inverse contingency. It gives us a little bit of cushion there.
Yes.
Should something really wonderful happen, like we end up with a period of growth that we didn't anticipate. But yeah, the only thing in that 1 week of reflection since we talked about it a week ago tonight, and established the sales tax limit and the mill levy for the other 50% of the aggregate 2 types of taxes that are shared to fulfill our need. And taking into account all that community deliberation and information that we've received over the past 6 to 8 months, I often ask myself, are we asking for enough with the current numbers that we have right now? I mean, we got one shot at this, and I know we've come to a consensus among council that this is an appropriate level, but I just, with our one shot, I definitely want to make sure that this fulfills the needs that we will be having for 25 years. And I'll be mayor in a couple of years, and that when those lines cross, I want to make sure they do in fact cross in a positive way. So that's my only thought. I mean,
you don't want them to cross.
I hope they have a nice parallel course. But that's my only thought. I have no qualms about the level of support we will receive and the purposes that it's specified for.
Could I just comment on that?
Yeah.
A tax is the base times the rate that equals the revenue that's generated. I think we're all very optimistic about the future of this city. With this Crater property and all the investments we're making, we're going to grow the base. We have 6 hotels coming in. That means 6 different companies have analyzed the value of investing in Durango. And they're making private sector investments. That's why, even more critically, we need to invest in our own infrastructure. So these hotels and businesses come to a place where the roads are good, the sidewalks are good, water and sewer is good. And we have demonstrated with the Santa Rita Water Reclamation Plant, we have a $54 million plant. We're at 61% complete, and we're ahead of schedule and under budget. And what Levi was talking about are little things that amount to a big change in the street system. So we've demonstrated there in his presentation that we are doing well with the money we have. And we're not asking for money we don't need.
And that's the perfect, this comment's been made, you can't tax your way out of a deficit, and this, but I see this as seed money, an appropriate amount of taxation to invite that kind of private investment to, which is really the key to economic prosperity for the community. So that's a really good point. This is just, our part of the puzzle that private sector is really gonna, is the key to economic prosperity and paying for all the things that all of us as citizens enjoy.
Councilor White?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. One, I simply want, well, I think I'll start with the other one first. We have the newspaper report on last week's study session. I think raised some concerns among one of the advisory boards in terms of the allocation of the dedicated sales tax money. And I think it's worthwhile taking this opportunity to reiterate that the advisory boards, by the 2015 language, the advisory boards make recommendations to the city council on how that money is to be allocated. In the end, it is the city council decision. The discussion we had last week indicated that there is scope within the language that when the rec center bonds are paid off at the end of 2018, which is hooray, at this great facility, which is now 20 years old, is fully paid off. But one of the questions then came up to say, well, what is the legitimate allocation within those guidelines for the money, for some of that money, which I have, at least in some conversations, referred to as a windfall. It's certainly money that has been allocated for a very specific purpose for 20 years. It's now, that piece is done. There's an extra ballpark $1 million a year that is available under the 2015 sales tax extension. And there's a range of things. I believe I understood staff last week to indicate that there's scope for some of that money to be reallocated toward operations, such as maintenance of the facility that was built with the money, that is to say the rec center. But I think it would be helpful for clarity to elaborate a little bit on staff's perception on that. How much of that might help operations. That's clearly a deliberation that's going to go on in the boards and then at the council before any decisions are made. But I think since the concerns were raised, I think it's worth addressing them in public. The budget isn't balanced for 2019, and for 2018,
we're going to have to watch, as I just mentioned, what the July sales reveal, and that'll determine what types of cuts or postponements we'd have to make to certain purchases or whatever for the current year. I don't think I can tell you tonight what I would recommend, because I don't have all the information, and I don't think that's a reasonable thing for me to be able to do. But we checked we had the city attorney and our bond attorney on what is legal. So I want the council to understand it is legal for us to use that money for park maintenance. And that is, I think, the question that Councilor White is posing. So to the...
That would relieve the general fund.
Well, what it would do is allow other money to be used for non-park purposes. So that's what and this is what the voters decided, to allow maintenance
Yes.
in both the 05 and the 15. What I recommend to you is just my opinion, and I'm advisory to the council. You know, you don't have to take that. You can change it. You have the ultimate authority, and that's why you have advisory boards. They have different perspectives, and it's great that the council has goals, because that's usually a guiding document for how you make decisions. But you could possibly have a recommendation from staff that differs from an advisory board. And, you know, that's probably helpful. We heard another testimony tonight from a citizen who thinks we should take it all. And we know that's not going to happen. So usually, you know, my philosophy is to, and I think it's proven by the survey, people like the services they get. We're trying to sail this ship right down the middle of the river, not deviate one side to the other, and keep things going steady and smooth. And I don't see me deviating with my recommendation next year. We win every budget award in the country, and the council has, I think, benefited from that advice. But you're going to make that decision in December on what you want to do with the budget. And if I can make a good argument, which I don't know what I'm recommending yet, then great. But the council has always heard from the public and from its advisory boards. And I don't think I've recommended something contrary to an advisory board. And you always get the written recommendations of the advisory board before your final decision on the budget is made.
Councilor Bettine?
Well, I
another-
actually,
I'm
I
sorry.
had a couple little further thing. And I think another point to that is that we've heard from the voters, or from the survey, about, and Amber summarized that, about seeing if we could get some income from fees, and we're looking at that, and some economies, and that's basically what the manager's been talking about. It's still a work in progress. It does go back to the point that Dean made. Are we asking for enough? I'm pretty well convinced that we are, because by asking for a little less, we're making a commitment to say, yeah, we can get by with somewhat less than the total amount. But the other point I wanted to make publicly tonight is the rationale that led the council to the choice of 5.4 mils. And that was my suggestion initially, and it has two pieces. One is that with our current property tax of 5 mils, we're 3.2 mils short of what our fire district charges its members. If we got 3.2 mils additional property tax, then we would have at least as much property tax charged to city residents as the members of the fire district already pay. And that opens the door for future to say, okay, we can recombine the city fire services, which we now contract from DFPD, with the rest of the DFPD, which was the goal 15 years ago when the Durango Fire and Rescue Authority was formed. I think that is a really important policy goal. The other 5.3.2, 5.4, the other 2.2 mils is what it would take to bond the new police station. And so those two pieces together are all about public safety and the key services from our fire and police who serve and protect every single property in the city of Durango. Those are exactly the kinds of things that our property taxes ought to be paying for. And council accepted that argument as saying, all right, that gives us a piece. Our citizens told us they really do prefer sales taxes. And so the larger piece of the revenue we're seeking to raise, especially for the streets, is going to come from the proposed 0.55 cents of sales tax. And I think that aligns quite well with what we've heard from our citizens about, we prefer sales taxes, but a mix is okay. And that's certainly my reading of the survey. And I feel totally comfortable with what we're asking voters.
Councilor Bettine?
Yeah, well, I didn't sign on to be a city councilor in Durango with the intent of my first year having the opportunity to raise taxes on our citizenry. I can assure you that. But through the process of studying the financial structure of our city, it was clearly evident by the great work that the city manager and staff did to demonstrate the structural deficiencies in the revenue flows relevant to this issue, that this was going to be a problem and it's coming right down the road. It was self-evident and very clear, and I think anyone who would take any time to study it in detail would find that to be revealing to them as well. And so I was convinced pretty early that we had to take this measure. And I do want to acknowledge the city staff and management for their efforts with the community. They took this extraordinary effort that I think will be a model for other communities as they contend with the Tabor issues relevant to these kinds of things. To have 45 public workshops over the course of a year is almost one a week, and to have the kind of attendance and 5,000 public comments in a city of under 20,000 people is just absolutely extraordinary. So I really can't say it enough, but I really commend you for the efforts you've made to hear from the citizenry of the city, because we certainly have. We've heard from them on an online survey. We've heard from them in all of these public workshops. We've heard from them in a statistically valid survey. And all of those things have pointed toward them saying that they want us to keep what we have and to maintain it to the best of our abilities. And they understand the structural deficiencies relevant to the financial picture of the city. And so we're simply putting that back out to them in the form of this ballot initiative to test whether or not that statistically valid survey information was accurate, because they voted to have their taxes increased by these amounts, and actually even more than is being asked for if you would look at those surveys. So I'm very comfortable with this. I very much support it, and our citizenry gets to decide whether they too are comfortable and understand the details behind it. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes out.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I, in general, think that this is actually an exciting time for our community. I think we've finally gotten to the point through a very long process that individuals are looking at, we have a need to address our infrastructure needs and our public safety. It's important. I think about young families who are raising children in our community, who are riding their bikes to take their kids to school down our streets. Florida Road is an excellent example of a job well done. I see families and parents riding their kids to school all the time, and it's a wonderful thing. I think that we are at a point in this community, we're growing, we have needs, we have to address those needs, and we have a community now that is willing, I believe, to pay for that. I think we have stepped, I appreciate the conservative approach that our staff has recommended that we take in only asking for what we need, because I can wholeheartedly get behind that and support that. And when you look at the cost of almost $13 an additional per property tax per month for your average home price in Durango, I think families would be willing to support that. I think that shows great benefit for the long term for our people. And so I am fundamentally behind it. I think this is the basics of government. This is what we do. This is what we provide. We provide public safety, we provide infrastructure, we provide services, and I would like to be able to do this and continue to do this for our community. I also think that our staff has shown, I think it's important to look at our wastewater treatment plant as an example of an ability to manage these projects. Right now, we are on time, on budget, on a $54 million project. That is commendable, and I think it shows what we have the ability to do going forward.
Thank you all. I would just like to remind everyone that the city has not asked for a property tax increase since 1982. And I believe the police department historically was a combo fire department and police department. And then it became, in the 70s, the police department. Well, I don't drive a 1970 car, but they're living in a building where it's a maze, and there's not enough room even in the property evidence. So I support the police department, just like I supported the fire department. And if you believe in public safety, then you'll vote yes on 2A. It's a combination. Mr. Simpson thinks that we didn't listen to anybody. Hello, all those meetings, all those comments, all those emails, yes, council has listened about a combination. And I want to remind the public that the city of Durango voted twice to support the county roads and bridges by raising our property taxes. So that tells me that I have faith in the people in Durango, that they will see that we need a new police department. One, we can't hire any more policemen. There's no place for them to sit or work unless we have another site for that, for the police department. That's very important. We talk about public safety. People want more policemen downtown. They want more policemen on the Animas River Trail. We can't create more policemen. We can't hire them if they have these adverse working conditions. So I have every faith in my neighbors. Yes, there will be people who will vote against it. You know what? They would vote against anything and everything. That's just kind of the nature of the electorate. I understand that. But my faith is that if you voted for county roads and bridges, you are sure going to support the city police department and the street department and curbs and gutters. And there's not a lot of sexy stuff about storm drains and alleys, but it's all in there. It's not about recreation. Recreation has their own bucket of money. That's the 2015 sales tax and the 205 sales tax for open space. That's their bucket of money. This is the bucket of money that pays for the streets and the police department and buildings and facilities in Durango. This is the cup that's empty. So those are my comments. With that, as I said, I have faith in the people of Durango. I'm going to look for a recommendation.
Do we have a resolution number?
Yes, we do. It's R 2018-35.
I will be pleased to move that we approve resolution R 2018-35.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilor Bricky?
Yes.
Councilor White?
Yes.
Councilor Patine?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef? Yes. Mayor Marbury?
Yes. And with that, I'm going to end the August 21st City Council meeting. Thank you so much for attending and watching, and my hat's off to the men and women in blue.
Didn't do reports and actions.
Nope.
Oh my God, don't stop now. Council reports and actions. We have to hear from the city manager. He has a, hello, I thought it was over. Okay.
We didn't actually make a motion.
Well, city manager?
I have two things to report on. The first is sales tax. Let me
That's good.
just give a quick one here. So the June sales were down 5.6%. Year-to-date, we're at 2.1 on the positive side. Lodger's tax for June was down 13.2, and for the year, it is breaking even at 0.7. The other item I wanted to report on was water.
The lodger's tax was negative 13%?
Yes.
For the month.
June.
So what I'd like to talk about is our current situation with water. We've been monitoring the city supply and the demand throughout this extreme drought. And we've had people come to the podium here during council meetings sharing some information that maybe wasn't complete. So let me present some information that can help you respond if you run into these types of people. So in La Plata County, there are 97 permitted water systems. So we are one of 97 water systems. We serve what's called a water service area, which we have to file with the Colorado Department of Health and Environment. And our obligation is to serve the people within our water service area. And I'm proud to announce that everyone in our water service area has water. They have good, clean water. They have good water pressure. And they seem to enjoy that. If you have a commercial structure, the water pressure allows you to get fire insurance at a discount. And I could not find any evidence of any agreement entered into by the city of Durango that would indicate we are responsible for serving outside of our water service area. And if such an agreement exists, I'd be happy to retract that statement. You know, that's not a good slide. I don't know what that is. So we are the largest of all the 97 water providers. And we serve 24,242 people. Lake Durango is the second largest, and they serve 2,800. And Animas Water Company, which is to the north, is third, and they serve 2,720. The top 10 water users or water producers ends with the Durango La Plata Airport, but also includes the towns of Bayfield and Ignacio and the major metro districts of Forest Lakes, Purgatory, Edgemont, and Durango West. So these are the top 10 water service providers. If we take the water card, the water dock cards, 1,200, add to that the 200 customers that we serve outside the city limits but within our water service area, that's 1,400 customers times 2.3 people per household. That would make us the second largest water provider, in addition to being the first largest water provider. So we're providing more water outside the city limits than any of these water providers within their service area. Let's think about that for a minute. So we need to have some teamwork here. doesn't make sense to me to come in and throw a hand grenade at the city when we are providing the most water to people in this county. And we provide good water. And we really are concerned with managing through this extreme drought. So the first thing I would like to suggest is let's look at the water docks. And if this is a countywide problem, let's get a network of water docks that may be funded through the county to serve county residents. Because everyone in the city and everyone in the city service area, water service area, gets city water. These water docks don't provide water to people in the city limits. And we ought to do a planning effort to geographically distribute those water docks so that they are where they're needed. So in those areas of the county that are subject to the extreme drought with well failures, let's have water docks in certain areas that are close to those folks. We probably should do better planning and stop issuing building permits to residences that do not have adequate water supply.
No, that's not the city of Durango. You're saying the county.
I'm saying that somebody else is doing that.
Okay.
And we just heard tonight from Matt Genoviak about the 416 fire. And I went to, in addition to the meeting, the daily meeting that the mayor mentioned, I would go to an 11 o'clock meeting of what's called the cooperators. So these were water providers throughout the county and some other special districts like health and so forth. And we'd go around the room, and lo and behold, their staff has never had incident management training. So they didn't know what we were talking about. They had never been trained. It only costs a little bit to get trained. Some of these things are free. If we're going to have emergencies with climate change, we're not going to leave this extreme drought anytime soon. These folks, these systems have to buck up and get their people trained to a standard that we have. And I think the top 10 water providers should be required to operate a water dock. Those top 10 should be able to do it. Don't come in here and throw a hand grenade. Put up a water dock. And a hand grenade is not productive. A water dock is. So why should someone out beyond Marvel have to drive all the way to the city when they're driving past 40 other water providers? That doesn't make sense to me. So I thought this information would be...
Could you post the top 10 again?
Sure.
So how many of those have water docks?
Okay, good question. The city of Durango has a water dock, the town of Bayfield, the town of Ignacio, and it's not on here, but Durango, let's see, the La Plata Archuleta Water District has a water dock located in Oxford. And then outside the county, Mancos has one. So that, and that might be closer for some people that live in the county than some of these other water docks.
So you're proposing, or your comment is that Forest Lakes and Purgatory Metro District and Edgemont Ranch and Animas Water District should come up with their own water docks.
Right.
And they could help out other people in the county.
They could, yes.
Okay.
So in closing, we're going to start selling water dock cards on September the 4th. The purpose of that moratorium was to get us through the peak demand season with irrigation. And we managed through that, through an extreme drought. None of the residential properties in Durango had to go on any kind of restrictions or conservation measures. We managed it by being efficient. We worked with the top 20 water users and cut 10% of their consumption. And they were able to achieve on a daily basis more conservation than we could achieve with residential measures on a weekly basis. It's easier to manage 20 than it is to manage, I don't know, 7,000 or 8,000 accounts. And we didn't have to hire any more staff, but those top 20 are people who are concerned with the community, and they gave up their operations so that we could have the benefit of that water. So I think that group should get a pat on the back. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. So you said September 4th,
September 4th, which is the Tuesday following Labor Day,
and you can buy
you can buy the cards.
right here at City Hall at the window.
Yes, and also, I think everybody knows, but for the public, there was always a way to get water. 4 of those 1,200 cards were professional water haulers who just call them up, they'll bring you water.
They were selling water to somebody or they wouldn't be in business.
Right.
Okay. I had talked to the city manager and I asked him to prepare that report. Thank you very much, city manager. Any comments about water dogs?
That was revealing, actually, quite that just the fact that our out of city limit users are the second biggest water. We are providing that water as well, which is more than either Lake Durango or this number 2 on the chart, or number 3, which is Annis Water.
Or the town of Bayfield and the town of Ignacio.
Right. Yeah.
And La Plade isn't yet in the top 10,
Not yet, no.
but I would think eventually they will be.
Yes.
Doing good things, yeah.
But that's, between the lines here, when you're looking at Lake Durango, that now the La Plata West Water Authority is bringing water to Lake Durango and will, over the next some years, starting to deliver to their subscribers. And so I think Lake Nighthorse is actually right now starting to benefit some of our citizens.
Well, we're back to council reports. Councilor Bettine. Mayor. Councilor Berkey.
But this, I'll just be real short. This is when I get to be the luckiest guy on city council. When I get announced that I'm going to a CAST meeting, Colorado Association of Ski Town meeting, Thursday and Friday in Crested Butte. A couple of the highlights that we'll be talking about: Luis Benitez is the director of Colorado Outdoor Recreation Industry Office for the governor, will be our keynote speaker kicking off. And then we'll talk about some innovative practices for attracting entrepreneurs in Paradise. That's the ICE Lab, which is currently developing in Gunnison. Then we will, our John Whitney's Senator Bennett's office will be talking about the Western Slope Ski Area Retention Act, and that was a mechanism where towns with ski areas associated with them get to keep a little more of the revenue created by their particular ski area. As you can imagine, ski areas aren't particularly impressed with that potential legislation, but the communities are. We will hear the final report of a study that was commissioned last year when I was president of this organization, which is the CAST Multimodal Transportation Best Practices Study. And that'll be the predominance of our afternoon session, and certain that Durango will be highlighted in that report. Then we'll talk about local impacts of climate change, again with Senator Bennett's office, talk about national legislation relative to that as it impacts recreation-based economies like ours. And we always wrap up with an innovator showcase in each little town. 3 towns selected get to talk about the coolest and new best thing that they're doing in their town. Durango was featured last time, so this time it'll be Crested Butte, Gunnison County, and Dillon with some of the new fun things that they're accomplishing. So, and that's, and I'll be back Friday.
Thank you. Councilor.
I will not be having my office hour this week and next. This week there's a Chamber of Commerce breakfast, and next week I actually will be taking a little getaway. Pick it up in September. Today I participated in the Pedal versus Metal Challenge as part of Clean Commute Week. I once again, as the driver of a four-wheel vehicle, I got dusted by almost everybody. The only finishers who came in after me had equipment problems with their bicycles. I was beaten by a motorcycle, a number of runners and all the bicyclists, all the other bicyclists. It really demonstrates that the quickest way to get around Durango is on a bicycle. And I just want to remind people that tomorrow is Clean Commute Day. And then on Thursday afternoon, the wrap-up of Clean Commute Week, which has been postponed 2 months because of the smoke, wraps up Thursday afternoon. And I believe that's in Scott.
Great, and if you have any comments about e-bikes, the one-year study is coming to a close in September. I would urge you to email City Council or to make comments to the Parks and Recs Department. So that's what's going on. We'll see you at Eggs and Issues on Thursday. Now we're really going home. Thank you. Amber, I'll do this next time.
We will.